Letter 24 of Clarissa Harlowe, or The History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or The History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson. Letter 24. Mr. Lovelace to John Belford, Esquire, Hampstead, Friday night, June 9. Now, Belford, for the narrative of narratives. I will continue it as I have opportunity, and that so dexterously that, if I break off 20 times, thou shalt not discern where I piece my thread. Although grievously afflicted with the gout, I alighted out of my chariot, leaning very hard on my cane with one hand, and on my new servant's shoulder with the other, the same instant almost that he had knocked at the door, that I might be sure of admission into the house. I took care to button my great-coat about me, and to cover with it even the pummel of my sword, it being a little too gay for my ears. I knew not what occasion I might have for my sword. I stooped forward, blinked with my eyes to conceal their lustre, no vanity in saying that, Jack, my chin wrapped up for the toothache, my slouched laced hat, and so much of my wig as was visible, giving me altogether the appearance of an antiquated beau. My wife, I resolved beforehand, should have a complication of disorders. The maid came to the door. I asked for her mistress. She showed me into one of the parlours, and I sat down with a gouty "Oh!" Enter Goody Moore. Your servant, madam, but you must excuse me, I cannot well stand. I find by the bill at the door that you have lodgings to let. Mumbling my words, as if, like my man Will, I had lost some of my foreteeth, be pleased to inform me what they are, for I like your situation, and I will tell you my family. I have a wife, a good old woman, older than myself, by the way, a pretty deal. She is in a bad state of health, and is advised into the Hampstead air. She will have 2 maid-servants and a footman. The coach or chariot, I shall not have them put up both together. We can put up anywhere, and the coachman will be with his horses. When, sir, shall you want to come in? I will take them from this very day, and, if convenient, will bring my wife in the afternoon. Perhaps, sir, you would board as well as lodge? That as you please. It will save me the trouble of bringing my cook, if we do. And I suppose you have servants who know how to dress a couple of dishes. My wife must eat plain food, and I don't love kickshaws. We have a single lady who will be gone in 2 or 3 days. She has one of the best apartments. That will then be at liberty. You have 1 or 2 good ones meantime, I presume, madam, just to receive my wife, for we have lost time. These damned physicians. Excuse me, madam, I am not used to curse, but it is owing to the love I have for my wife. They have kept her in hand, till they are ashamed to take more fees, and now advise her to the air. I wish we had sent her hither at first, but we must now make the best of it. Excuse me, madam, for she looked hard at me, that I am muffled up in this warm weather. I am but too sensible that I have left my chamber sooner than I ought, and perhaps shall have a return of my gout for it. I came out thus muffled up with a dreadful pain in my jaws, an ague in them, I believe, but my poor dear will not be satisfied with anybody's care but mine, and, as I told thee, we have lost time. You shall see what accommodations I have, if you please, sir, but I doubt you are too lame to walk up stairs. I can make shift to hobble up now I have rested a little. I'll just look upon the apartment my wife is to have. Anything may do for the servants, and as you seem to be a good sort of gentlewoman, I shan't stand for a price, and will pay well besides for the trouble I shall give. She led the way, and I, helping myself by the banisters, made shift to get up with less fatigue than I expected from ankles so weak. But oh, Jack, what was Sixtus the Fifth's artful depression of his natural powers to mine, when, as his half-dead Montalto, he gaped for the pretendedly unsought pontificate, and the moment he was chosen leapt upon the prancing beast, which it was thought by the amazed conclave he was not able to mount, without help of chairs and men. Never was there a more joyful heart and lighter heels than mine joined together, yet both denied their functions, the one fluttering in secret, ready to burst its bars for reliefful expression, the others obliged to an hobbling motion, when unrestrained they would, in their master's imagination, have mounted him to the lunar world without the help of a ladder. There were 3 rooms on a floor, 2 of them handsome, and a third, she said, still handsomer, but the lady was in it. I saw she was, for as I hobbled up, crying out upon my weak ankles, in the hoarse mumbling voice I had assumed, I beheld a little piece of her as she just cast an eye, with the door ajar, as they call it, to observe who was coming up, and seeing such an old clumsy fellow, great-coated in weather so warm, slouched and muffled up, she withdrew, shutting the door without any emotion. But it was not so with me. For thou canst not imagine how my heart danced to my mouth at the very glimpse of her, so that I was afraid the thumping villain, which had so lately thumped as much to no purpose, would have choked me. I liked the lodging well, and the more as she said the 3rd room was still handsomer. I must sit down, madam, and chose the darkest part of the room. Won't you take a seat yourself? No price shall part us, But I will leave the terms to you and my wife, if you please, and also whether for board or not. Only please to take this for earnest, putting a guinea into her hand. And one thing I will say, my poor wife loves money, but is not an ill-natured woman. She was a great fortune to me, but as the real estate goes away at her death, I would fain preserve her for that reason, as well as for the love I bear her as an honest man. But if she makes too close a bargain with you, tell me, and unknown to her I will make it up. This is my constant way. She loves to have her penn'orth, and I would not have her vexed or made uneasy on any account. She said I was a very considerate gentleman, and upon the condition I had mentioned, she was content to leave the terms to my lady. But, madam, cannot a body just peep into the other apartment, that I may be more particular to my wife in the furniture of it? The lady desires to be private, sir, but and was going to ask her leave. I caught hold of her arm. However, stay, madam. It mayn't be proper, if the lady loves to be private. Don't let me intrude upon the lady. No intrusion, sir, I dare say. The lady is good-humoured. She will be so kind as to step down into the parlour, I dare say. As she stays so little a while, I am sure she will not wish to stand in my way. No, madam, that's true, if she be good-humoured, as you say. Has she been with you long, madam? She came but yesterday, sir. I believe I just now saw the glimpse of her. She seems to be an elderly lady. No, sir, you're mistaken. She's a young lady, and one of the handsomest I ever saw. God, so, I beg her pardon. Not but that I should have liked her the better, were she to stay longer, if she had been elderly. I have a strange taste, madam, you'll say, but I really, for my wife's sake, love every elderly woman. Indeed, I ever thought age was to be reverenced, which made me, taking the fortune into the scale too that I own, make my addresses to my present dear. Very good of you, sir, to respect age. We all hope to live to be old. Right, madam. But you say the lady is beautiful. Now you must know, that though I choose to converse with the elderly, yet I love to see a beautiful young woman, just as I love to see fine flowers in a garden. There's no casting an eye upon her, is there, without her notice? For in this dress, and thus muffled up about my jaws, I should not care to be seen any more than she, let her love privacy as much as she will. I will go and ask if I may show a gentleman the apartment, sir, and as you are a married gentleman, and not over young, she'll perhaps make the less scruple. Then, like me, she loves elderly folks best, perhaps, but it may be she has suffered by young ones. I fancy she has, sir, or is afraid she shall. She desired to be very private, and if by description inquired after, to be denied. Thou art a true woman, Goody Moore, thought I. Good lack, what may be her story then, I pray? She is pretty reserved in her story, but to tell you my thoughts, I believe love is in the case. She is always in tears, and does not much care for company. Nay, madam, it becomes not me to dive into ladies' secrets. I want not to pry into other people's affairs. But pray, how does she employ herself? Yet she came but yesterday, so you can't tell. Writing continually, sir. These women, Jack, when you ask them questions by way of information, don't care to be ignorant of any thing. Nay, excuse me, madam, I am very far from being an inquisitive man, but if her case be difficult, and not merely love, as she is a friend of yours, I would give her my advice. Then you are a lawyer, sir? Why, indeed, madam, I was some time at the bar, but I have long left practice, yet am much consulted by my friends in difficult points. In a pauper case I frequently give money, but never take any from the richest. You are a very good gentleman then, sir. Ay, madam, we cannot live always here, and we ought to do what good we can, but I hate to appear officious. If the lady stay any time, and think fit, upon better acquaintance, to let me into her case, it may be a happy day for her, if I find it a just one. For you must know, that when I was at the bar, I never was such a sad fellow as to undertake, for the sake of a paltry fee, to make white black, and black white. For what would that have been, but to endeavour to establish iniquity by quirks, while I robbed the innocent? You are an excellent gentleman, sir. I wish, and then she sighed, I had had the happiness to know there was such a lawyer in the world, and to have been acquainted with him. Come, Mrs. Moore, I think your name is. It may not be too late. When you and I are better acquainted, I may help you, perhaps. But mention nothing of this to the lady, for, as I said, I hate to appear officious. This prohibition, I knew, if Goody Moore answered the specimen she had given of her womanhood, would make her take the first opportunity to tell, were it to be necessary to my purpose that she should. I appeared upon the whole so indifferent about seeing the room or the lady, that the good woman was the more eager I should see both, and the rather as I, to stimulate her, declared, that there was more required in my eye to merit the character of a handsome woman than most people thought necessary, and that I had never seen 6 truly lovely women in my life. To be brief, she went in, and after a little while came out again. The lady, sir, is retired to her closet, so you may go in and look at the room. Then how my heart began again to play its pug's tricks. I hobbled in, and stumped about, and liked it very much, and was sure my wife would. I begged excuse for sitting down, and asked, who was the minister of the place, if he were a good preacher, who preached at the chapel, and if he were a good preacher, and a good liver too, madam, I must inquire after that, for I love, but I must needs say, that the clergy should practise what they preach. Very right, sir, but that is not so often the case as were to be wished. More's the pity, madam. But I have a great veneration for the clergy in general. It is more a satire upon human nature than upon the cloth, if we suppose those who have the best opportunities to do good less perfect than other people. For my part, I don't love professional any more than national reflections. But I keep the lady in her closet. My gout makes me rude. Then up from my seat stumped I. What do you call these window curtains, madam? Stuffed damask, sir. It looks mighty well, truly. I like it better than silk. It is warmer, to be sure, and much fitter for lodgings in the country, especially for people in years. The bed is in a pretty state. It is neat and clean, sir. That's all we pretend to. Ay, mighty well, very well. A silk camlet, I think. Very well, truly. I am sure my wife will like it. But we would not turn the lady out of her lodgings for the world. The other 2 apartments will do for us at present. Then stumping towards the closet, over the door of which hung a picture. What picture is that? Oh, I see, a St. Cecilia. A common print, sir. Pretty well, pretty well. It is after an Italian master. I would not for the world turn the lady out of her apartment. He can make shift with the other 2, repeated I, louder still, but yet mumblingly hoarse, for I had as great regard to uniformity in accent as to my words. Oh, Belford, to be so near my angel, think what a painful constraint I was under. I was resolved to fetch her out if possible, and pretending to be going. You can't agree as to any time, Mrs. Moore, when we can have this 3rd room, can you? Not that, whispered I, loud enough to be heard in the next room, not that I would incommode the lady, but I would tell my wife whenabouts, and women, you know, Mrs. Moore, love to have every thing before them of this nature. Mrs. Moore, said my charmer, and never did her voice sound so harmonious to me. Oh, how my heart bounded again! It even talked to me in a manner, for I thought I heard, as well as felt, its unruly flutters, and every vein about me seemed a pulse. Mrs. Moore, you may acquaint the gentleman that I shall stay here only for 2 or 3 days at most, till I receive an answer to a letter I have written into the country, and rather than be your hindrance, I will take up with any apartment a pair of stairs higher. Not for the world, not for the world, young lady, cried I. My wife, as I love her, should lie in a garret, rather than put such a considerate young lady as you seem to be, to the least inconveniency. She opened not the door yet, and I said, But since you have so much goodness, madam, if I could but just look into the closet as I stand, I could tell my wife whether it is large enough to hold a cabinet she much values, and will have with her wherever she goes. Then my charmer opened the door, and blazed upon me, as it were, in a flood of light, like what one might imagine would strike a man, who, born blind, had by some propitious power been blessed with his sight all at once in a meridian sun. Upon my soul, I never was so strangely affected before. I had much ado to forbear discovering myself that instant. But hesitatingly, and in great disorder, I said, looking into the closet and around it, There is room, I see, for my wife's cabinet, and it has many jewels in it of high price. But upon my soul, for I could not forbear swearing like a puppy, habit is a cursed thing, Jack. Nothing so valuable as a lady I see can be brought into it. She started, and looked at me with terror. The truth of the compliment, as far as I know, had taken dissimulation from my accent. I saw it was impossible to conceal myself longer from her, any more than, from the violent impulses of my passion, to forbear manifesting myself. I unbuttoned therefore my cape, I pulled off my flat slouched hat, I threw open my great coat, and like the devil in Milton, an odd comparison though, I started up in my own form divine, touched by the beam of her celestial eye, more potent than ethereal spear. Now, Belford, for similitude, now for a likeness to illustrate the surprising scene, and the effect it had upon my charmer and the gentlewoman. But nothing was like it, or equal to it. The plain fact can only describe it, and set it off. Thus, then take it. She no sooner saw who it was, than she gave 3 violent screams, and, before I could catch her in my arms, as I was about to do the moment I discovered myself, down she sunk at my feet in a fit, which made me curse my indiscretion for so suddenly, and with so much emotion, revealing myself. The gentlewoman, seeing so strange an alteration in my person and features, and voice and dress, cried out, Murder! Help! Murder! Help! by turns, for 6 times running. This alarmed the house, and up ran 2 servant maids, and my servant after them. I cried out for water and hartshorn, and every one flew a different way, one of the maids as fast down as she came up, while the gentlewoman ran out of one room into another, and by turns up and down the apartment we were in, without meaning or end, wringing her foolish hands, and not knowing what she did. Up then came running a gentleman and his sister, fetched and brought in by the maid, who had run down, and having let in a cursed crabbed old wretch, hobbling with his gout, and mumbling with his hoarse broken-toothed voice, who was metamorphosed all at once into a lively, gay young fellow with a clear accent, and all his teeth, she would have it that I was neither more nor less than the devil, and could not keep her eye from my foot, expecting, no doubt, every minute to see it discover itself to be cloven. For my part, I was so intent upon restoring my angel, that I regarded nobody else. And at last, she slowly recovering motion, with bitter sighs and sobs, only the whites of her eyes, however, appearing for some moments, I called upon her in the tenderest accent, as I kneeled by her, my arm supporting her head, my angel, my charmer, my Clarissa, look upon me, my dearest life. I am not angry with you. I will forgive you, my best beloved. The gentleman and his sister knew not what to make of all this, and the less when my fair one, recovering her sight, snatched another look at me, and then again groaned, and fainted away. I threw up the closet sash for air, and then left her to the care of the young gentlewoman, the same notable Miss Rawlins, who I had heard of at the Flask, and to that of Mrs. Moore, who by this time had recovered herself, and then retiring to one corner of the room, I made my servant pull off my gouty stockings, brush my hat, and loop it up into the usual smart cock. I then stepped to the closet to Mr. Rawlins, whom, in the general confusion, I had not much minded before. Sir, said I, you have an uncommon scene before you. The lady is my wife, and no gentleman's presence is necessary here but my own. I beg pardon, sir, if the lady be your wife, I have no business here. But, sir, by her concern at seeing you. Pray, sir, none of your ifs and buts, I beseech you, nor your concern about the lady's concern. You are a very unqualified judge in this cause, and I beg of you, sir, to oblige me with your absence. The women only are proper to be present on this occasion, added I, and I think myself obliged to them for their care and kind assistance. 'Tis well he made not another word, for I found my choler begin to rise. I could not bear that the finest neck, and arms, and foot in the world should be exposed to the eyes of any man living but mine. I withdrew once more from the closet, finding her beginning to recover, lest the sight of me too soon should throw her back again. The first words she said, looking round her with great emotion, were, "Oh, hide me, hide me! Is he gone? Oh, hide me! Is he gone?" Sir, said Miss Rawlins, coming to me with an air both peremptory and assured, this is some surprising case. The lady cannot bear the sight of you. What you have done is best known to yourself. But another such fit will probably be her last. It would be but kind, therefore, for you to retire. It behoved me to have so notable a person of my party, and the rather, as I had disobliged her impertinent brother. The dear creature, said I, may well be concerned to see me. If you, madam, had a husband who loved you as I love her, you would not, I am confident, fly from him, and expose yourself to hazards, as she does whenever she has not all her way. And yet with a mind not capable of intentional evil, but mother spoilt. This is her fault, and all her fault, and the more inexcusable it is, as I am the man of her choice, and have reason to think she loves me above all the men in the world. Here, Jack, was a story to support to the lady, face to face too. And here, Belford, lest thou, through inattention, should be surprised at my assurance, let me remind thee, and that thus by way of marginal observation, that I may not break in upon my narrative, that this my intrepidity concerted, as I have from time to time acquainted thee, in apprehension of such an event as has fallen out. For had not the dear creature already passed for my wife before no less than 4 worthy gentlemen of family and fortune, and before Mrs. Sinclair and her household, and Miss Partington? And had she not agreed to her uncle's expedient, that she should pass for such from the time of Mr. Hickman's application to that uncle, and that the worthy Captain Tomlinson should be allowed to propagate that belief, as he had actually reported to 2 families, they possibly to more, purposely that it might come to the ears of James Harlowe, and serve for a foundation for Uncle John to build his reconciliation scheme upon? And canst thou think that nothing was meant by all this contrivance, and that I am not still further prepared to support my story? Indeed, I little thought at the time that I formed these precautionary schemes, that she would ever have been able, if willing, to get out of my hands. All that I hoped I should have occasion to have recourse to them for, was only, in case I should have the courage to make the grand attempt, and should succeed in it, to bring the dear creature, and this out of tenderness to her. For what attention did I ever yet pay to the grief, the execrations, the tears of a woman I had triumphed over, to bear me in her sight, to expostulate with me, to be pacified by my pleas, and by my own future hopes, founded upon the reconciliatory project, upon my reiterated vows, and upon the Captain's assurances? Since in that case to forgive me, to have gone on with me for a week, would have been to forgive me, to have gone on with me for ever. And that, had my eligible life of honour taken place, her trials would all have been then over, and she would have known nothing but gratitude, love, and joy, to the end of one of our lives. For never would I, never could I, have abandoned such an admirable creature as this. Thou knowest I never was a sordid villain to any of her inferiors, I may say, for who is not her inferior? You speak like a gentleman, you look like a gentleman, said Miss Rawlins. But, sir, this is a strange case. The lady seems to dread the sight of you. No wonder, madam, taking her a little on one side, nearer to Mrs. Moore. I have 3 times already forgiven the dear creature. But this is jealousy. There is a spice of that in it, and of frenzy too, whispered I, that it might have the face of a secret, and of consequence the more engage their attention. But our story is too long. I then made a motion to go to my beloved, but they desired that I would walk into the next room, and they would endeavour to prevail upon her to lie down. I begged that they would not suffer her to talk, for that she was accustomed to fits, and when in this way would talk of any thing that came uppermost, and the more she was suffered to run on, the worse she was, and if not kept quiet, would fall into ravings, which might possibly hold her a week. They promised to keep her quiet, and I withdrew into the next room, ordering every one down but Mrs. Moore and Miss Rawlins. She was full of exclamations. Unhappy creature! Miserable! Ruined! and undone! She called herself, wrung her hands, and begged they would assist her to escape from the terrible evil she should otherwise be made to suffer. They preached patience and quietness to her, and would have had her to lie down, but she refused, sinking, however, into an easy chair, for she trembled so she could not stand. By this time I hoped that she was enough recovered to bear a presence that it behoved me to make her bear, and fearing she would throw out something in her exclamations that would still more disconcert me, I went into the room again. "Oh, there he is," said she, and threw her apron over her face. "I cannot see him. I cannot look upon him. Begone, begone, touch me not." For I took her struggling hand, beseeching her to be pacified, and assuring her that I would make all up with her upon her own terms and wishes. "Base man," said the violent lady, "I have no wishes but never to behold you more. Why must I be thus pursued and haunted? Have you not made me miserable enough already? Despoiled of all succour and help, and of every friend? I am contented to be poor, low, and miserable, so I may live free from your persecutions." Miss Rawlins stared at me. A confident slut, this Miss Rawlins, thought I. So did Mrs. Moore. "I told you so, Whispering," said I, turning to the women, shaking my head with a face of great concern and pity, and then to my charmer, "My dear creature, how you rave! You will not easily recover from the effects of this violence. Have patience, my love, be pacified, and we will coolly talk this matter over, for you expose yourself as well as me. These ladies will certainly think you have fallen among robbers, and that I am the chief of them." "So you are, so you are!" stamping, her face still covered, she thought of Wednesday night, no doubt, and sighing as if her heart were breaking, she put her hand to her forehead. "I shall be quite distracted." "I will not, my dearest love, uncover your face. You shall not look upon me, since I am so odious to you. But this is a violence I never thought you capable of." And I would have pressed her hand as I held it with my lips, but she drew it from me with indignation. "Unhand me, sir," said she. "I will not be touched by you. Leave me to my fate. What right, what title have you to persecute me thus?" "What right, what title, my dear? But this is not a time. I have a letter from Captain Tomlinson. Here it is," offering it to her. "I will receive nothing from your hands. Tell me not of Captain Tomlinson. Tell me not of any body. You have no right to invade me thus. Once more leave me to my fate. Have you not made me miserable enough?" I touched a delicate string, on purpose to set her in such a passion before the women as might confirm the intimation I had given of a phrensical disorder. What a turn is here! Lately so happy, nothing wanting but a reconciliation between you and your friends. That reconciliation in such a happy train, shall so slight, so accidental an occasion be suffered to overturn all our happiness? She started up with a trembling impatience, her apron falling from her indignant face. "Now," said she, "that thou darest to call the occasion slight and accidental, and that I am happily out of thy vile hands, and out of a house I have reason to believe as vile, traitor and wretch as thou art, I will venture to cast an eye upon thee, and oh that it were in my power, in mercy to my sex, to look thee first into shame and remorse, and then into death." This violent tragedy speech, and the high manner in which she uttered it, had its desired effect. I looked upon the women, and upon her by turns, with a pitying eye, and they shook their wise heads, and besought me to retire, and her to lie down to compose herself. This hurricane, like other hurricanes, was presently allayed by a shower. She threw herself once more into her arm-chair, and begged pardon of the women for her passionate excess, but not of me. Yet I was in hopes, that when compliments were stirring, I should have come in for a share. "Indeed, ladies," said I, with assurance enough, thou'lt say, "this violence is not natural to my beloved's temper. Misapprehension." "Misapprehension, wretch! And want I excuses from thee?" By what a scorn was every lovely feature agitated! Then turning her face from me, "I have not patience, O thou guileful betrayer, to look upon thee. Begone, begone! With a face so unblushing, how darest thou appear in my presence?" I thought then, that the character of a husband obliged me to be angry. "You may one day, madam, repent this treatment. By my soul, you may. You know I have not deserved it of you. You know I have not." "Do I know you have not? Wretch! Do I know?" "You do, madam; and never did man of my figure and consideration," I thought it was proper to throw that in, "meet with such treatment." She lifted up her hands. Indignation kept her silent. "But all is of a piece with the charge you bring against me of despoiling you of all succour and help, of making you poor and low, and with other unprecedented language. I will only say, before these two gentlewomen, that since it must be so, and since your former esteem for me is turned into so riveted an aversion, I will soon, very soon, make you entirely easy. I will be gone. I will leave you to your own fate, as you call it. And may that be happy! Only that I may not appear to be a spoiler, a robber indeed, let me know whither I shall send your apparel, and every thing that belongs to you, and I will send it. Send it to this place, and assure me, that you will never molest me more, never more come near me, and that is all I ask of you. I will do so, madam, said I, with a dejected air. But did I ever think I should be so indifferent to you? However, you must permit me to insist on your reading this letter, and on your seeing Captain Tomlinson, and hearing what he has to say from your uncle. He will be here by and by. Don't trifle with me, said she, in an imperious tone. Do as you offer. I will not receive any letter from your hands. If I see Captain Tomlinson, it shall be on his own account, not on yours. You tell me you will send me my apparel. If you would have me believe any thing you say, let this be the test of your sincerity. Leave me now, and send my things. The women started. They did nothing but stare, and appeared to be more and more at a loss what to make of the matter between us. I pretended to be going from her in a pet, but, when I had got to the door, I turned back, and, as if I had recollected myself, one word more, my dearest creature, charming even in your anger. O my fond soul, said I, turning half round and pulling out my handkerchief. I believe, Jack, my eyes did glisten a little. I have no doubt but they did. The women pitied me, honest souls. They showed they had each of them a handkerchief as well as I. So, hast thou not observed, to give a familiar illustration, every man in a company of a dozen or more obligingly pull out his watch when some one has asked what's o'clock? As each man of a like number, if one talks of his beard, will fall to stroking his chin with his four fingers and thumb. One word only, madam, repeated I, as soon as my voice had recovered its tone. I have represented to Captain Tomlinson in the most favourable light the cause of our present misunderstanding. You know what your uncle insists upon, and with which you have acquiesced. The letter in my hand, and again I offered it to her, will acquaint you with what you have to apprehend from your brother's active malice. She was going to speak in a high accent, putting the letter from her with an open palm. Nay, hear me out, madam. The Captain, you know, has reported our marriage to two different persons. It is come to your brother's ears. My own relations have also heard of it. Letters were brought me from town this morning, from Lady Betty Lawrance and Miss Montague. Here they are. I pulled them out of my pocket, and offered them to her, with that of the Captain. But she held back her still open palm, that she might not receive them. Reflect, madam, I beseech you. Reflect upon the fatal consequences with which this, your high resentment, may be attended. Ever since I knew you, said she, I have been in a wilderness of doubt and error. I bless God that I am out of your hands. I will transact for myself what relates to myself. I dismiss all your solicitude for me. Am I not my own mistress? Have you any title? The women stared. The devil stare ye, thought I. Can you do nothing but stare? It was high time to stop her here. I raised my voice to drown hers. You used, my dearest creature, to have a tender and apprehensive heart. You never had so much reason for such a one as now. Let me judge for myself upon what I shall see, not upon what I shall hear. Do you think I shall ever? I dreaded her going on. I must be heard, madam, raising my voice still higher. You must let me read one paragraph or two out of this letter to you, if you will not read it yourself. Begone from me, man! Begone from me with thy letters! What pretence hast thou for tormenting me thus? What right? What title? Dearest creature, what questions you ask! Questions that you can as well answer yourself. I can, I will, and thus I answer them. Still louder I raised my voice. She was overborne. Sweet soul, it would be hard, thought I, and yet I was very angry with her, if such a spirit as thine cannot be brought to yield to such a one as mine. I lowered my voice on her silence. All gentle, all entreative my accent. My head bowed, one hand held out, the other on my honest heart. For heaven's sake, my dearest creature, resolve to see Captain Tomlinson with temper. He would have come along with me, but I was willing to try to soften your mind first on this fatal misapprehension, and this for the same of your own wishes. For what is it otherwise to me, whether your friends are or are not reconciled to us? Do I want any favour from them? For your own mind's sake, therefore, frustrate not Captain Tomlinson's negotiation. That worthy gentleman will be here in the afternoon. Lady Betty will be in town with my cousin Montague in a day or two. They will be your visitors. I beseech you, do not carry this misunderstanding so far, as that Lord M. and Lady Betty and Lady Sarah may know it. How considerable this made me look to the women. Lady Betty will not let you rest till you consent to accompany her to her own seat, and to that lady may you safely entrust your cause. Again, upon pausing a moment, she was going to break out. I liked not the turn of her countenance, nor the tone of her voice. And thinkest thou, base wretch, were the words she did utter, I again raised my voice and drowned hers, base wretch, madam, you know that I have not deserved the violent names you have called me, words so opprobrious from a mind so gentle. But this treatment is from you, madam? From you, whom I love more than my own soul? By that soul I swear that I do. The women looked upon each other. They seemed pleased with my ardour. Women, whether wives, maids, or widows, love ardours. Even Miss Howe, thou knowest, speaks up for ardours. Nevertheless, I must say, that you have carried matters too far for the occasion. I see you hate me. She was just going to speak. If we are to separate for ever, in a strong and solemn voice, proceeded I, this island shall not long be troubled with me. Meantime, only be pleased to give these letters a perusal, and consider what is to be said to your uncle's friend, and what he is to say to your uncle. Any thing will I come into, renounce me, if you will, that shall make for your peace, and for the reconciliation your heart was so lately set upon. But I humbly conceive, that it is necessary that you should come into better temper with me, were it but to give a favourable appearance to what has passed, and wait to any future application to your friends, in whatever way you shall think proper to make it. I then put the letters into her lap, and retired into the next apartment with a low bow, and a very solemn air. I was soon followed by the two women. Mrs. Moore withdrew to give the fair perverse time to read them. Miss Rawlins for the same reason, and because she was sent for home. The widow besought her speedy return. I joined in the same request, and she was ready enough to promise to oblige us. I excused myself to Mrs. Moore for the disguise I had appeared in at first, and for the story I had invented. I told her that I held myself obliged to satisfy her for the whole floor we were upon, and for an upper room for my servant, and that for a month certain. She made many scruples, and begged she might not be urged on this head, till she had consulted Miss Rawlins. I consented, but told her that she had taken my earnest, and I hoped there was no room for dispute. Just then Miss Rawlins returned, with an air of eager curiosity, and having been told what had passed between Mrs. Moore and me, she gave herself airs of office immediately, which I humoured, plainly perceiving that if I had her with me, I had the other. She wished, if there were time for it, and if it were not quite impertinent in her to desire it, that I would give Mrs. Moore and her a brief history of an affair which, as she said, bore the face of novelty, mystery, and surprise. For sometimes it looked to her as if we were married, at other times that point appeared doubtful, and yet the lady did not absolutely deny it, but upon the whole thought herself highly injured. I said that ours was a very particular case, that were I to acquaint them with it, some part of it would hardly appear credible. But, however, as they seem hardly to be persons of discretion, I would give them a brief account of the whole, and this in so plain and sincere a manner, that it should clear up to their satisfaction every thing that had passed or might hereafter pass between us. They sat down by me, and threw every feature of their faces into attention. I was resolved to go as near the truth as possible, lest any thing should drop from my spouse to impeach my veracity, and yet keep in view what passed at the flask. It is necessary, although thou knowest my whole story, and a good deal of my views, that thou shouldst be apprized of the substance of what I told them. I gave them, in as concise a manner as I was able, this history of our families, fortunes, alliances, antipathies, her brother's and mine particularly. I averred the truth of our private marriage. The Captain's letter, which I will enclose, will give thee my reasons for that. And besides, the women might have proposed a parson to me by way of compromise. I told them the condition my spouse had made me swear to, and to which she held me, in order, I said, to induce me the sooner to be reconciled to her relations. I own that this restraint made me sometimes ready to fly out, and Mrs. Moore was so good as to declare, that she did not much wonder at it. Thou art a very good sort of woman, Mrs. Moore, thought I. As Miss Howe has actually detected our mother, and might possibly find some way still to acquaint her friend with her discoveries, I thought it proper to prepossess them in favour of Mrs. Sinclair and her two nieces. I said, they were gentlewomen born, that they had not bad hearts, that indeed my spouse did not love them, they having once taken the liberty to blame her for her over-niceness with regard to me. People, I said, even good people, who knew themselves to be guilty of a fault they had no inclination to mend, were too often least patient when told of it, as they could less bear than others to be thought indifferently of. Too often the case, they own. Mrs. Sinclair's house was a very handsome house, and fit to receive the first quality. True enough, Jack. Mrs. Sinclair was a woman very easy in her circumstances. A widow gentlewoman, as you, Mrs. Moore, are. Lets lodgings, as you, Mrs. Moore, do. Once had better prospects, as you, Mrs. Moore, may have had. The relict of Colonel Sinclair. You, Mrs. Moore, might know Colonel Sinclair. He had lodgings at Hampstead. She had heard of the name. Oh, he was related to the best families in Scotland. And his widow is not to be reflected upon because she lets lodgings, you know, Mrs. Moore. You know, Miss Rawlins. Very true, and very true. and they must needs say, it did not look quite so pretty in such a lady as my spouse to be so censorious. A foundation here, thought I, to procure these women's help to get back the fugitive, or their connivance at least at my doing so, as well as for anticipating any future information from Miss Howe. I gave them a character of that virago, and intimated, that for a head to contrive mischief, and a heart to execute it, she had hardly her equal in her sex. To this Miss Howe it was, Mrs. Moore said, she supposed, that my spouse was so desirous to dispatch a man and horse by day dawn, with a letter she wrote before she went to bed last night, proposing to stay no longer than till she had received an answer to it. The very same, said I. I knew she would have immediate recourse to her. I should have been but too happy, could I have prevented such a letter from passing, or so to have it managed, as to have it given into Mrs. Howe's hands, instead of her daughter's. Women who had lived some time in the world knew better than to encourage such skittish pranks in young wives. Let me just stop to tell thee, while it is in my head, that I have since given Will his cue to find out where the man lives, who is gone with the fair fugitive's letter, and, if possible, to see him on his return, before he sees her. I told the women, I despaired that it would ever be better with us, while Miss Howe had so strange an ascendancy over my spouse, and remained herself unmarried. And until the reconciliation with her friends could be effected, or a still happier event, as I should think it, who am the last male of my family, and which my foolish vow and her rigour had hitherto— Here I stopped, and looked modest, turning my diamond ring round my finger, while Goody Moore looked mighty significant, calling it a very particular case, and the maiden fanned away, and primmed and pursed, to show that what I had said needed no further explanation. I told them the occasion of our present difference. I avowed the reality of the fire, but owned that I would have made no scruple of breaking the unnatural oath she had bound me in, having a husband's right on my side, when she was so accidentally frighted into my arms; and I blamed myself excessively that I did not, since she thought fit to carry her resentment so high, and had the injustice to suppose the fire to be a contrivance of mine. Nay, for that matter, Mrs. Moore said, as we were married, and Madam was so odd, every gentleman would not— And stop there, Mrs. Moore. To suppose I should have recourse to such a poor contrivance, said I, when I saw the dear creature every hour! Was not this a bold put, Jack? A most extraordinary case, truly, cried the maiden, fanning, yet coming in with her well but's, and her sifting pray, sirs, and her restraining enough, sirs, flying from the question to the question, her seat now and then uneasy, for fear my want of delicacy should hurt her abundant modesty, and yet it was difficult to satisfy her superabundant curiosity. My beloved's jealousy, and jealousy of itself to female minds accounts for 1,000 unaccountablenesses, and the imputation of her half-frenzy brought upon her by her father's wicked curse, and by the previous persecution she had undergone from all her family, were what I dwelt upon, in order to provide against what might happen. In short, I owned against myself most of the offences which I did not doubt but she would charge me with in their hearing; and as every cause has a black and white side, I gave the worst parts of our story the gentlest turn; and when I had done, acquainted them with some of the contents of that letter of Captain Tomlinson which I left with the lady. I concluded with James Harlowe, and of Captain Singleton, or of any sailor-looking men. This, thou wilt see from the letter itself, was necessary to be done. Here therefore thou mayest read it; and a charming letter to my purpose wilt thou find it to be, if thou givest the least attention to its contents. To Robert Lovelace, Esq. Wednesday, June 7th. Dear Sir, although I am obliged to be in town to-morrow, or next day at farthest, yet I would not dispense with writing to you by one of my servants, whom I send up before upon a particular occasion, in order to advertise you, that it is probable you will hear from some of your own relations on your supposed nuptials. One of the persons, Mr. Lilburn by name, to whom I hinted my belief of your marriage, happens to be acquainted with Mr. Spurrier, Lady Betty Lawrance's steward, and not being under any restriction, mentioned it to Mr. Spurrier, and he to Lady Betty, as a thing certain; and this, though I have not the honour to be personally known to her ladyship, brought on an inquiry from her ladyship to me by her gentleman, who coming to me in company with Mr. Lilburn, I had no way but to confirm the report. And I understand that Lady Betty takes it amiss that she was not acquainted with so desirable a piece of news from yourself. What is between hooks, thou mayest suppose, Jack, I sunk upon the women, in the account I gave them of the contents of this letter. Her ladyship, it seems, has business that calls her to town, and you will possibly choose to put her right. If you do, it will, I presume, be in confidence, that nothing may transpire from your own family to contradict what I have given out. I have ever been of opinion, that truth ought to be strictly adhered to on all occasions, and am concerned that I have, though with so good a view, departed from my old maxim. But my dear friend Mr. John Harlowe would have it so. Yet I never knew a departure of this kind a single departure. But to make the best of it now, allow me, Sir, once more to beg the lady, as soon as possible, to authenticate the report given out. When both you and the lady join in the acknowledgement of your marriage, it will be impertinent in any one to be inquisitive as to the day or week, and if as privately celebrated as you intend, while the gentlewomen with whom you lodge are properly instructed, as you say they are, and who shall actually believe you were married long ago, who shall be able to give a contradiction to my report? And yet it is very probable that minute inquiries will be made, and this is what renders precaution necessary. For Mr. James Harlowe will not believe that you are married, and is sure, he says, that you both lived together when Mr. Hickman's application was made to Mr. John Harlowe. And if you lived together any time unmarried, he infers from your character, Mr. Lovelace, that it is not probable that you would ever marry. And he leaves it to his two uncles to decide, if you even should be married, whether there be not room to believe that his sister was first dishonoured; and if so, to judge of the title she will have to their favour, or to the forgiveness of any of her family. I believe, sir, this part of my letter had best be kept from the lady. Young Mr. Harlowe is resolved to find this out, and to come at his sister's speech likewise, and for that purpose sets out to-morrow, as I am well informed, with a large attendance armed, and Mr. Solmes is to be of the party. And what makes him the more earnest to find it out is this. Mr. John Harlowe has told the whole family that he will alter and new settle his will. Mr. Anthony Harlowe is resolved to do the same by his; for it seems he has now given over all thoughts of changing his condition, having lately been disappointed in a view he had of that sort with Mrs. Howe. These two brothers generally act in concert, and Mr. James Harlowe dreads, and let me tell you that he has reason for it, on my Mr. Harlowe's account, that his younger sister will be at last more benefited than he wishes for by the alteration intended. He has already been endeavouring to sound his uncle Harlowe on this subject, and wanted to know whether any new application had been made to him on his sister's part. Mr. Harlowe avoided a direct answer, and expressed his wishes for a general reconciliation, and his hopes that his niece were married. This offended the furious young man, and he reminded his uncle of engagements they had all entered into at his sister's going away, not to be reconciled but by general consent. Mr. John Harlowe complains to me often of the uncontrollableness of his nephew, and says that now that the young man has not anybody of whose superior sense he stands in awe, he observes not decency in his behaviour to any of them, and this makes my Mr. Harlowe still more desirous than ever of bringing his younger niece into favour again. I will not say all I might of this young man's extraordinary rapaciousness, but one would think that these grasping men expect to live for ever. I took the liberty, but within these 2 hours, to propose to set on foot, and offered my cover to, a correspondence between my friend and his daughter niece, as she still sometimes fondly calls her. She was mistress of so much prudence, I said, that I was sure she could better direct every thing to its desirable end than anybody else could. But he said he did not think himself entirely at liberty to take such a step at present, and that it was best that he should have it in his power to say occasionally that he had not any correspondence with her or letter from her. You will see, sir, from all this, the necessity of keeping our treaty an absolute secret, and if the lady has mentioned it to her worthy friend Miss Howe, I hope it is in confidence. And now, sir, a few lines in answer to yours of Monday last. Mr. Harlowe was very well pleased with your readiness to come into his proposal. But as to what you both desire, that he will be present at the ceremony, he said, that his nephew watched all his steps so narrowly, that he thought it was not practicable, if he were inclinable, to oblige you, but that he consented with all his heart that I should be the person whom he had stipulated should be privately present at the ceremony on his part. However, I think I have an expedient for this, if your lady continues to be very desirous of her uncle's presence, except he should be more determined than his answer to me seemed to import, of which I shall acquaint you, and perhaps of what he says to it, when I have the pleasure to see you in town. But indeed I think you have no time to lose. Mr. Harlowe is impatient to hear that you are actually won, and I hope I may carry him down word when I leave you next, that I saw the ceremony performed. If any obstacle arises from the lady, from you it cannot, I shall be tempted to think a little hardly of her punctilio. Mr. Harlowe hopes, sir, that you will rather take pains to avoid than to meet this violent young man. He has the better opinion of you, let me tell you, sir, from the account I gave him of your moderation and politeness, neither of which are qualities with his nephew. But we have all of us something to amend. You cannot imagine how dearly my friend still loves this excellent niece of his. I will give you an instance of it, which affected me a good deal. If once more, said he, the last time but one we were together, I can but see the sweet child gracing the upper end of my table, as mistress of my house, in the allotted month, all the rest of my family present but as her guests, for so I formerly would have it, and had her mother's consent for it. There he stopped, for he was forced to turn his reverend face from me. Tears ran down his cheeks. Fain would he have hid them, but he could not. Yet, said he, how, poor gentleman, he perfectly sobbed, how shall I be able to bear the first meeting? I bless God I am no hard-hearted man, Mr. Lovelace. My eyes showed to my worthy friend that he had no reason to be ashamed of his humanity before me. I will put an end to this long epistle. Be pleased to make my compliments acceptable to the most excellent of women, as well as believe me to be, dear Sir, your faithful friend and humble servant, Antony Tomlinson. During the conversation between me and the women, I had planted myself at the furthest end of the apartment we were in, over against the door, which was open, and opposite to the lady's chamber door, which was shut. I spoke so low that it was impossible for her at that distance to hear what we said, and in this situation I could see if her door was opened. I told the women, that what I had mentioned to my spouse of Lady Betty's coming to town with her niece Montague, and of their intention to visit my beloved, whom they had never seen, nor she them, was real, and that I expected news of their arrival every hour. I then showed them copies of the other 2 letters which I had left with her, the one from Lady Betty, the other from my cousin Montague, and here thou mayest read them if thou wilt. Eternally reproaching, eternally upbraiding me, are my impertinent relations, but they are fond of occasions to find fault with me. Their love, Jack, and their dependence on my known good humour, are their inducements. To Robert Lovelace, Esq. Wednesday morning, June 7th. Dear Nephew, I understand that at length all our wishes are answered in your happy marriage, but I think we might as well have heard of it directly from you, as from the roundabout way by which we have been made acquainted with it. Methinks, sir, the power and the will we have to oblige you should not expose us the more to your slights and negligence. My brother had set his heart upon giving to you the wife we have all so long wished you to have. But if you were actually married at the time you made him that request, supposing perhaps that his gout would not let him attend you, it is but like you. I gave Mrs. Moore and Miss Rawlins room to think this reproach just, Jack. If your lady had her reasons to wish it to be private while the differences between her family and self continue, you might nevertheless have communicated it to us with that restriction, and we should have forborne the public manifestations of our joy upon an event we have so long desired. The distant way we have come to know it is by my steward, who is acquainted with a friend of Captain Tomlinson, to whom that gentleman revealed it, and he, it seems, had it from yourself and lady, with such circumstances as leave it not to be doubted. I am indeed very much disobliged with you. So is Lady Sarah. But I have a very speedy opportunity to tell you so in person, being obliged to go to town to my old Chancery affair. My cousin Leeson, who is, it seems, removed to Albemarle Street, has notice of it. I shall be at her house, where I bespeak your attendance of Sunday night. I have written to my cousin Charlotte for either her or her sister to meet me at Reading and accompany me to town. I shall stay but a few days, my business being matter of form only. On my return I shall pop upon Lord M. at M. Hall, to see in what way his last fit has left him. Meantime, having told you my mind on your negligence, I cannot help congratulating you both on the occasion, your fair lady particularly, upon her entrance into a family which is prepared to admire and love her. My principal intention of writing to you, dispensing with the necessary punctilio, is, that you may acquaint my dear new niece, that I will not be denied the honour of her company down with me into Oxfordshire. I understand that your proposed house and equipages cannot be soon ready. She shall be with me till they are. I insist upon it. This shall make all up. My house shall be her own. My servants and equipages hers. Lady Sarah, who has not been out of her own house for months, will oblige me with her company for a week, in honour of a niece so dearly beloved, as I am sure she will be of us all. Being but in lodgings in town, neither you nor your lady can require much preparation. Some time on Monday I hope to attend the dear young lady, to make her my compliments, and to receive her apology for your negligence, which, and her going down with me, as I said before, shall be full satisfaction. Meantime, God bless her for her courage. Tell her I say so, and bless you both in each other, and that will be happiness to us all, particularly to your truly affectionate aunt, Elizabeth Lawrence. To Robert Lovelace, Esq. Dear Cousin, at last, as we understand, there is some hope of you. Now does my good Lord run over his bead roll of proverbs, of black oxen, wild oats, long lanes, and so forth. Now, cousin, say I, is your time come, and you will be no longer, I hope, an infidel either to the power or excellence of the sex you have pretended hitherto so much as undervalue, nor a ridiculer or scoffer at an institution which all sober people reverence, and all rakes, sooner or later, are brought to reverence, or to wish they had. I want to see how you become your silken fetters, whether the charming yoke sits light upon your shoulders. If with such a sweet yoke fellow it does not, my lord, and my sister, as well as I, think that you will deserve a closer tie about your neck. His lordship is very much displeased that you have not written him word of the day, the hour, the manner, and every thing. But I ask him how he can already expect any mark of deference or politeness from you. He must stay, I tell him, till that sign of reformation, among others, appear from the influence and example of your lady, but that, if ever you will be good for any thing, it will be quickly seen. And, oh, cousin, what a vast, vast journey have you to take from the dreary land of libertinism, through the bright province of reformation, into the serene kingdom of happiness. You had need to lose no time. You have many a weary step to tread before you can overtake those travellers who set out for it from a less remote quarter. But you have a charming pole star to guide you. That's your advantage. I wish you joy of it. And as I have never yet expected any highly complaisant thing from you, I make no scruple to begin first. But it is purely, I must tell you, in respect to my new cousin, whose accession into our family we most heartily congratulate and rejoice in. I have a letter from Lady Betty. She commands either my attendance or my sister's to my cousin Leeson's. She puts Lord M. in hopes that she shall certainly bring down with her our lovely new relation, for she says she will not be denied. His lordship is the willinger to let me be the person, as I am in a manner wild to see her, my sister having 2 years ago had that honour at Sir Robert Biddulph's. So get ready to accompany us in our return, except your lady had objections strong enough to satisfy us all. Lady Sarah longs to see her, and says this accession to the family will supply to it the loss of her beloved daughter. I shall soon, I hope, pay my compliments to the dear lady in person, so have nothing to add but that I am your old mad playfellow and cousin, Charlotte Montague. The women having read the copies of these 2 letters, I thought that I might then threaten and swagger. But very little heart have I, said I, to encourage such a visit from Lady Betty and Miss Montague to my spouse. For after all, I am tired out with her strange ways. She is not what she was, and, as I told her in your hearing, ladies, I will leave this plaguy island, though the place of my birth, and though the stake I have in it is very considerable, and go and reside in France or Italy, and never think of myself as a married man, nor live like one. Oh dear, said one. That would be a sad thing, said the other. Nay, madam, turning to Mrs. Moore. Indeed, madam, to Miss Rawlins, I am quite desperate. I can no longer bear such usage. I have had the good fortune to be favoured by the smiles of very fine ladies, though I say it, and I looked very modest, both abroad and at home. Thou knowest this to be true, Jack. With regard to my spouse here, I have but one hope left, for as to the reconciliation with her friends, I scorn them all too much to value that but for her sake. And that was, that if it pleased God to bless us with children, she might entirely recover her usual serenity, and we might then be happy. But the reconciliation her heart was so much set upon is now, as I hinted before, entirely hopeless, made so by this rash step of hers, and by the rash temper she is in, since, as you will believe, her brother and sister, when they come to know it, will make a fine handle of it against us both, affecting as they do at present to disbelieve our marriage, and the dear creature herself too ready to countenance such a disbelief, as nothing more than the ceremony, as nothing more than the ceremony. Here, as thou wilt perceive, I was bashful, for Miss Rawlins, by her preparatory primness, put me in mind that it was proper to be so. I turned half round, then facing the fan player and the matron, you yourselves, ladies, knew not what to believe till now, that I have told you our story, and I do assure you that I shall not give myself the same trouble to convince people I hate, people from whom I neither expect nor desire any favour, and who are determined not to be convinced. And what, pray, must be the issue, when her uncle's friend comes, although he seems to be a truly worthy man? It is not natural for him to say, to what purpose, Mr. Lovelace, should I endeavour to bring about a reconciliation between Mrs. Lovelace and her friends, by means of her elder uncle, when a good understanding is wanting between yourselves? A fair inference, Mrs. Moore. A fair inference, Miss Rawlins. And here is the unhappiness. Till she is reconciled to them, this cursed oath, in her notion, is binding. The women seemed moved, for I spoke with great earnestness, though low. And besides, they love to have their sex and its favours appear of importance to us. They shook their deep heads at each other, and looked sorrowful, and this moved my tender heart too. 'Tis an unheard of case, ladies. Had she not preferred me to all mankind, there I stopped. And that, resumed I, feeling for my handkerchief, is what staggered Captain Tomlinson when he heard of her flight, who, the last time he saw us together, saw the most affectionate couple on earth. The most affectionate couple on earth. In the accent grievous, repeated I. Out then I pulled my handkerchief, and putting it to my eyes, arose, and walked to the window. It makes me weaker than a woman, did I not love her, as never man loved his wife. I have no doubt but I do, Jack. There again I stopped, and resuming, charming creature as you see she is, I wish I had never beheld her face. Excuse me, ladies. Traversing the room, and having rubbed my eyes till I supposed them red, I turned to the women, and pulling out my letter case, I will show you one letter. Here it is. Read it, Miss Rawlins, if you please. It will confirm to you how much all my family are prepared to admire her. I am freely treated in it. So I am in the 2 others. But after what I have told you, nothing need be a secret to you too. She took it with an air of eager curiosity, and looked at the seal, ostentatiously coroneted, and at the superscription, reading out, To Robert Lovelace, Esquire. Ay, madam. Ay, miss, that's my name. Giving myself an air, though I had told it to them before. I am not ashamed of it. My wife's maiden name, unmarried name, I should rather say, fool that I am, and I rubbed my cheek for vexation, fool enough in conscience, Jack, was Harlowe. Clarissa Harlowe. You heard me call her my Clarissa. I did, but thought it to be a feigned or love name, said Miss Rawlins. I wonder what is Miss Rawlins' love name, Jack. Most of the fair romancers have in their early womanhood chosen love names. No parson ever gave more real names than I have given fictitious ones. And to very good purpose. Many a sweet dear has answered me a letter for the sake of owning a name which her godmother never gave her. No, it was her real name, I said. I bid her read out the whole letter. If the spelling be not exact, Miss Rawlins, said I, you will excuse it. The writer is a lord. But perhaps I may not show it to my spouse; for if those I have left with her have no effect upon her, neither will this. And I shall not care to expose my Lord M. to her scorn. Indeed, I begin to be quite careless of consequences. Miss Rawlins, who could not but be pleased with this mark of my confidence, looked as if she pitied me. And here thou mayest read the letter, No. 3. To Robert Lovelace, Esquire, Montague Hall, Wednesday, June 7th. Cousin Lovelace, I think you might have found time to let us know of your nuptials being actually solemnized. I might have expected this piece of civility from you. But perhaps the ceremony was performed at the very time that you asked me to be your lady's father. But I should be angry if I proceed in my guesses. And little said is soon amended. But I can tell you, that Lady Betty Lawrance, whatever Lady Sarah does, will not so soon forgive you as I have done. Women resent slights longer than men. You that know so much of the sex, I speak it not, however, to your praise, might have known that. But never was you before acquainted with a lady of such an amiable character. I hope there will be but one soul between you. I have before now said, that I will disinherit you, and settle all I can upon her, if you prove not a good husband to her. May this marriage be crowned with a great many fine boys. I desire no girls, to build up again a family so ancient. The first boy shall take my surname by Act of Parliament. That is my will. Lady Betty and niece Charlotte will be in town about business before you know where you are. They long to pay their compliments to your fair bride. I suppose you will hardly be at the Lawn when they get to town, because Greme informs me you have sent no orders there for your lady's accommodation. Pritchard has all things in readiness for signing. I will take no advantage of your slights. Indeed, I am too much used to them. More praise to my patience than to your complaisance, however. One reason for Lady Betty's going up, as I may tell you under the rose, is, to buy some suitable presents for Lady Sarah and all of us to make on this agreeable occasion. We would have blazed it away, could we have had timely notice, and thought it would have been agreeable to all round. The like occasions don't happen every day. My most affectionate compliments and congratulations to my new niece conclude me, for the present in violent pain, that with all your heroic illness would make you mad, your truly affectionate uncle, M. This letter clenched the nail. Not but that Miss Rawlins said, she saw I had been a wild gentleman, and truly she thought so the moment she beheld me. They began to intercede for my spouse, so nicely had I turned the tables, and that I would not go abroad and disappoint a reconciliation so much wished for on one side, and such desirable prospects on the other, in my own family. Who knows, thought I to myself, but more may come of this plot than I had even promised myself. What a happy man shall I be, if these women can be brought to join to carry my marriage into consummation? Ladies, you are exceedingly good to us both. I should have some hopes, if my unhappily nice spouse could be brought to dispense with the unnatural oath she has laid me under. You see what my case is. Do you think I may not insist upon her absolving me from this abominable oath? Will you be so good as to give your advice, that one apartment may serve for a man and his wife at the hour of retirement? Modestly put, Belford. And let me here observe, that few rakes would find a language so decent as to engage modest women to talk with him in upon such subjects. They both simpered, and looked upon one another. These subjects always make women simper, at least. No need but of the most delicate hints to them. A man who is gross in a woman's company ought to be knocked down with a club; for, like so many musical instruments, touch but a single wire, and the dear souls are sensible all over. To be sure, Miss Rawlins learnedly said, playing with her fan, a casuist would give it, that the matrimonial vow ought to supersede any other obligation. Mrs. Moore, for her part, was of opinion, that if the lady owned herself to be a wife, she ought to behave like one. Whatever be my luck, thought I, with this all-eyed fair one, any other woman in the world, from 15 to 25, would be mine upon my own terms, before the morning. And now, that I may be at hand to take all advantages, I will endeavour, said I to myself, to make sure of good quarters. I am your lodger, Mrs. Moore, in virtue of the earnest I have given you for these apartments, and for any one you can spare above for my servants. Indeed, for all you have to spare. For who knows what my spouse's brother may attempt? I will pay you to your own demand, and that for a month or two certain, board included, as I shall or shall not be your hindrance. Take that as a pledge, or in part of payment, offering her a £30 bank-note. She declined taking it, desiring she might consult the lady first, adding, that she doubted not my honour, and that she would not let her apartments to any other person, whom she knew not something of, while I and the lady were here. The lady, from both women's mouths continually, which still implied a doubt in their hearts, and not your spouse and your lady, sir. I never met with such women, thought I, so thoroughly convinced but this moment, yet already doubting. I am afraid I have a couple of sceptics to deal with. I knew no reason, I said, for my wife to object to my lodging in the same house with her here, any more than in town at Mrs. Sinclair's. But were she to make such objection, I would not quit possession, since it was not unlikely that the same freakish disorder which brought her to Hampstead might carry her absolutely out of my knowledge. They both seemed embarrassed, and looked upon one another, yet with such an air as if they thought there was reason in what I said, and I declared myself her boarder, as well as lodger, and dinner time approaching, was not denied to be the former. End of Letter 24. Letter 25 of Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson. Letter 25. Mr. Lovelace to John Belford, Esquire. I thought it was now high time to turn my whole mind to my beloved, who had had full leisure to weigh the contents of the letters I had left with her. I therefore requested Mrs. Moore to step in, and desired to know whether she would be pleased to admit me to attend her in her apartment on occasion of the letters I had left with her, or whether she would favour me with her company in the dining-room. Mrs. Moore desired Miss Rawlins to accompany her in to the lady. They tapped at the door, and were both admitted. I cannot but stop here for 1 minute to remark, though against myself, upon that security which innocence gives, that nevertheless had better have in it a greater mixture of the serpent with the dove. For here, heedless of all I could say behind her back, because she was satisfied with her own worthiness, she permitted me to go on with my own story without interruption to persons as great strangers to her as me, and who, as strangers to both, might be supposed to lean to the side most injured, and that, as I managed it, was to mine. A dear, silly soul, thought I, at the time, to depend upon the goodness of her own heart, when the heart cannot be seen into but by its actions, and she to appearance a runaway, an eloper, from a tender, a most indulgent husband, to neglect to cultivate the opinion of individuals, when the whole world is governed by appearance. Yet what can be expected of an angel under 20? She has a world of knowledge, knowledge speculative, as I may say, but no experience. How should she? Knowledge by theory only is a vague, uncertain light, a will-o'-the-wisp, which as often misleads the doubting mind as puts it right. There are many things in the world, could a moralizer say, that would afford inexpressible pleasure to a reflecting mind, were it not for the mixture they come to us with. To be graver still, I have seen parents, perhaps my own did so, who delighted in those very qualities in their children while young, the natural consequences of which, too much indulged and encouraged, made them, as they grew up, the plague of their hearts. To bring this home to my present purpose, I must tell thee, that I adore this charming creature for her vigilant prudence. But yet I would not, methinks, wish her, by virtue of that prudence, which is, however, necessary to carry her above the devices of all the rest of the world, to be too wise for mine. My revenge, my sworn revenge, is nevertheless, adore her as I will, uppermost in my heart. Miss Howe says that my love is a Herodian love. By my soul, that girl's a witch. I am half sorry to say that I find a pleasure in playing the tyrant over what I love. Call it an ungenerous pleasure, if thou wilt. Softer hearts than mine know it. The women, to a woman, know it, and show it too, whenever they are trusted with power. And why should it be thought strange that I, who love them so dearly, and study them so much, should catch the infection of them? End of Letter 25. Letter 26 of Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson. Letter 26. Mr. Lovelace to John Belford, Esquire. I will now give thee the substance of the dialogue that passed between the two women and the lady. Wonder not that a perverse wife makes a listening husband. The event, however, as thou wilt find, justified the old observation, that listeners seldom hear good of themselves. Conscious of their own demerits, if I may guess by myself, there's ingenuousness, Jack, and fearful of censure, they seldom find themselves disappointed. There is something of sense, after all, in these proverbs, in these phrases, in this wisdom of nations. Mrs. Moore was to be the messenger, but Miss Rawlins began the dialogue. Your spouse, madam? Devil! Only to fish for a negative or affirmative declaration. My spouse, madam? Mr. Lovelace, madam, avers that you are married to him, and begs admittance, or your company in the dining-room, to talk upon the subject of the letters he left with you. He is a poor wicked wretch. Let me beg of you, madam, to favour me with your company as often as possible while he is hereabouts, and I remain here. I shall with pleasure attend you, madam. But methinks I could wish you would see the gentleman, and hear what he has to say on the subject of the letters. My case is a very hard one. I am quite bewildered. I know not what to do. I have not a friend in the world that can or will help me. Yet had none but friends till I knew that man. The gentleman neither looks nor talks like a bad man. Not a very bad man, as men go. As men go! Poor Miss Rawlins, thought I. And dost thou know how men go? O Madam, you know him not. He can put on the appearance of an angel of light, but has a black, a very black heart. Poor I! I could not have thought it, truly. But men are very deceitful now a days. Now a days! A fool! Have not her history books told her that they were always so? Mrs. Moore, sighing. I have found it so, I am sure, to my cost. Who knows but in her time poor Goody Moore may have met with a Lovelace, or a Belford, or some such vile fellow? My little harum-scarum beauty knows not what strange histories every woman living, who has had the least independence of will, could tell her, who was such to be as communicative as she is. But here's the thing. I have given her cause enough of offence, but not enough to make her hold her tongue. Clarissa. As to the letters he has left with me, I know not what to say to them, but am resolved never to have any thing to say to him. Miss R. If, Madam, I may be allowed to say so, I think you carry matters very far. Has he been making a bad cause a good one with you, Madam? That he can do with those who know him not. Indeed, I heard him talking, thought not what he said, and am indifferent about it. But what account does he give of himself? I was pleased to hear this. To arrest, to stop her passion, thought I, in the height of its career, is a charming presage. Then the busy Miss Rawlins fished on, to find out from her either a confirmation or disavowal of my story. Was Lord M. my uncle? Did I court her at first with the allowance of her friends, her brother excepted? Had I a rencounter with that brother? Was she so persecuted in favour of a very disagreeable man, one Solmes, as to induce her to throw herself into my protection? None of these were denied. All the objections she could have made were stifled or kept in by the considerations, as she mentioned, that she should stay there but a little while, and that her story was too long. But Miss Rawlins would not be thus easily answered. Miss R. He says, Madam, that he could not prevail for marriage till he had consented under a solemn oath to separate beds, while your family remained unreconciled. Clarissa. O the wretch! What can be still in his head to endeavour to pass these stories upon strangers? So, no direct denial, thought I. Admirable! All will do by and by. He has owned that an accidental fire had frightened you very much on Wednesday night, and that an accidental fire had frightened you, very much frightened you, last Wednesday night. Then, after a short pause, in short, he owned that he had taken some innocent liberties, which might have led to a breach of the oath you had imposed upon him, and that this was the cause of your displeasure. I would have been glad to see how my charmer then looked. To be sure, she was at a loss in her own mind to justify herself for resenting so highly an offence so trifling. She hesitated, did not presently speak. When she did, she wished that she, Miss Rawlins, might never meet with any man who would take such innocent liberties with her. Miss Rawlins pushed further. Your case, to be sure, Madam, is very particular. But if the hope of a reconciliation with your own friends is made more distant by your leaving him, give me leave to say, that 'tis pity, I suppose the maiden then primmed, fanned, and blushed, 'tis pity the oath cannot be dispensed with, especially as he owns he has not been so strict a liver. I could have gone in and kissed the girl. You have heard his story. Mine, as I told you before, is too long and too melancholy. My disorder on seeing the wretch is too great, and my time here is too short, for me to enter upon it. And if he has any end to serve by his own vindication, in which I shall not be a personal sufferer, let him make himself appear as white as an angel, with all my heart. My love for her, and the excellent character I gave her, were then pleaded. Specious seducer! Only tell me if I cannot get away from him by some back way. How my heart then went pit-a-pat, to speak in the female dialect. Let me look out. I heard the sash lifted up. Whither does that path lead? Is there no possibility of getting to a coach? Surely he must deal with some fiend, or how could he have found me out? Cannot I steal to some neighbouring house, where I may be concealed till I can get quite away? You are good people. I have not always been among such. Oh, help me, ladies, with a voice of impatience, or I am ruined. Then pausing, is that the way to Hendon? Pointing, I suppose. Is Hendon a private place? The Hampstead coach, I am told, will carry passengers thither. Mrs. Moore. I have an honest friend at Mill Hill. Devil fetch her, thought I. Where, if such be your determination, Madam, and if you think yourself in danger, you may be safe, I believe. Anywhere, if I can but escape from this man. Whither does that path lead? Out yonder. What is that town on the right hand called? Highgate, Madam. Miss R. On the side of the heath is a little village called North End. A kinswoman of mine lives there. But her house is small. I am not sure she could accommodate such a lady. Devil take her too, thought I. I imagined that I had made myself a better interest in these women. But the whole sex love plotting. And plotters too, Jack. A barn, an outhouse, a garret will be a palace to me, if it will but afford me a refuge from this man. Her senses, thought I, are much livelier than mine. What a devil have I done that she should be so very implacable? I told thee, Belford, all I did. Was there any thing in it so very much amiss? Such prospects of a family reconciliation before her, too. To be sure, she is a very sensible lady. She then espied my new servant walking under the window, and asked if he were not one of mine. Will was on the look out for old Grimes, so is the fellow called whom my beloved has dispatched to Miss Howe. And being told that the man she saw was my servant, I see, said she, that there is no escaping unless you, madam, to Miss Rawlins, I suppose, can befriend me till I can get further. I have no doubt that the fellow is planted about the house to watch my steps. But the wicked wretch, his master, has no right to control me. He shall not hinder me from going where I please. I will raise the town upon him if he molest me. Dear ladies, is there no back door for me to get out at while you hold him in talk? Miss R. Give me leave to ask you, madam, is there no room to hope for accommodation? Had you not better see him? He certainly loves you dearly. He is a fine gentleman. You may exasperate him, and make matters more unhappy for yourself. O Mrs. Moore! O Miss Rawlins! You know not the man. I wish not to see his face, nor to exchange another word with him as long as I live. Mrs. Moore. I don't find, Miss Rawlins, that the gentleman has misrepresented any thing. You see, madam, to my Clarissa, how respectful he is, not to come in till permitted. He certainly loves you dearly. Pray, madam, let him talk to you, as he wishes to do, on the subject of his letters. Very kind of Mrs. Moore. Mrs. Moore, thought I, is a very good woman. I did not curse her then. Miss Rawlins said something, but so low that I could not hear what it was. Thus it was answered. I am greatly distressed. I know not what to do. But, Mrs. Moore, be so good as to give his letters to him. Here they are. Be pleased to tell him that I wish him and Lady Betty and Miss Montague a happy meeting. He never can want excuses to them for what has happened, any more than pretences to those he would delude. Tell him that he has ruined me in the opinion of my own friends. I am for that reason the less solicitous how I appear to his. Mrs. Moore then came to me, and I, being afraid that something would pass mean time between the other two, which I should not like, took the letters, and entered the room, and found them retired into the closet, my beloved whispering with an air of earnestness to Miss Rawlins, who was all attention. Her back was towards me, and Miss Rawlins, by pulling her sleeve, giving intimation of my being there. Can I have no retirement uninvaded, sir? Said she, with indignation, as if she were interrupted in some talk her heart was in. What business have you here, or with me? You have your letters, have you not? I have, my dear, and let me beg of you to consider what you are about. I every moment expect Captain Tomlinson here. Upon my soul, I do. He has promised to keep from your uncle what has happened. But what will he think if he find you hold in this strange humour? I will endeavour, sir, to have patience with you for a moment or two, while I ask you a few questions before this lady, and before Mrs. Moore, who just then came in, both of whom you have prejudiced in your favour by your specious stories. Will you say, sir, that we are married together? Lay your hand upon your heart, and answer me. Am I your wedded wife? I am gone too far, thought I, to give up for such a push as this, home one as it is. My dearest soul, how can you put such a question? It is either for your honour or my own that it should be doubted. Surely, surely, madam, you cannot have attended to the contents of Captain Tomlinson's letter. She complained often of want of spirits throughout her whole contention, and of weakness of person and mind, from the fit she had been thrown into. But little reason had she for this complaint, as I thought, who was able to hold me to it as she did. I own that I was excessively concerned for her several times. You and I, vilest of men! My name is Lovelace, madam. Therefore it is that I call you the vilest of men. Was this pardonable, Jack? You and I know the truth, the whole truth. I want not to clear up my reputation with these gentlewomen. That is already lost with every one I had most reason to value. But let me have this new specimen of what you are capable of. Say, wretch! Say, Lovelace, if thou hadst rather. Art thou really and truly my wedded husband? Say! Answer without hesitation. She trembled with impatient indignation, but had a wildness in her manner, which I took some advantage of, in order to parry this cursed thrust. And a cursed thrust it was, since had I positively averred it, she would never have believed any thing I said. And had I owned that I was not married, I had destroyed my own plot, as well with the women as with her, and could have no pretence for pursuing her, or hindering her from going wheresoever she pleased. Not that I was ashamed to aver it, had it been consistent with policy. I would not have thee think me such a milksop neither. My dearest love, how wildly you talk! What would you have me answer? It is necessary that I should answer. May I not re-appeal this to your own breast, as well as to Captain Tomlinson's treaty and letter? You know yourself how matters stand between us, and Captain Tomlinson... O wretch! Is this an answer to my question? Say, are we married, or are we not? What makes a marriage, we all know, if it be the union of two hearts. There was a turn, Jack. To my utmost grief, I must say that we are not, since now I see you hate me. If it be the completion of marriage, to my confusion and regret, I must own we are not. But, my dear, will you be pleased to consider what answer half a dozen people whence you came would give to your question? And do not now, in the disorder of your mind, and the height of passion, bring into question before these gentlewomen a point you have acknowledged before those who know us better. I would have whispered her about the treaty with her uncle, and about the contents of the captain's letter. But retreating, and with a rejecting hand, Keep thy distance, man, cried the dear insolent. To thine own heart I appeal, since thou evadest me thus pitifully. I own no marriage with thee. Bear witness, ladies, I do not. And cease to torment me, cease to follow me. Surely, surely, faulty as I have been, I have not deserved to be thus persecuted. I resume therefore my former language. You have no right to pursue me. You know you have not. Begone then, and leave me to make the best of my hard lot. O my dear, cruel father, said she, in a violent fit of grief, falling upon her knees, and clasping her uplifted hands together, thy heavy curse is completed upon thy devoted daughter. I am punished, dreadfully punished, by the very wretch in whom I had placed my wicked confidence. By my soul, Belford, the little witch with her words, but more by her manner, moved me. Wonder not then that her action, her grief, her tears, set the women into the like compassionate manifestations. Had I not a cursed task of it? The two women withdrew to the further end of the room, and whispered, A strange case! There is no frenzy here, I just heard said. The charming creature threw her handkerchief over her head and neck, continuing kneeling, her back towards me, and her face hid upon a chair, and repeatedly sobbed with grief and passion. I took this opportunity to step to the women to keep them steady. You see, ladies, whispering, what an unhappy man I am. You see what a spirit this dear creature has. All owing to her implacable relations and to her father's curse. A curse upon them all. They have turned the head of the most charming woman in the world. Ah, sir, replied Miss Rawlins, whatever be the fault of her relations, all is not as it should be between you and her. 'Tis plain she does not think herself married. 'Tis plain she does not. And if you have any value for the poor lady, and would not totally deprive her of her senses, you had better withdraw, and leave to time and cooler consideration the event in your favour. She will compel me to this at last, I fear, Miss Rawlins. I fear she will. And then we are both undone, for I cannot live without her. She knows it too well, and she has not a friend who will look upon her. This also she knows. Our marriage, when her uncle's friend comes, will be proved incontestably. But I am ashamed to think I have given her room to believe it no marriage. That's what she harps upon. Well, 'tis a strange case, a very strange one, said Miss Rawlins, and was going to say further, when the angry beauty, coming towards the door, said, Mrs. Moore, I beg a word with you. And they both stepped into the dining room. I saw her just before put a parcel into her pocket, and followed them out, for fear she should slip away, and stepping to the stairs, that she might not go by me, Will, cried I, aloud, though I knew he was not near, pray, child, to a maid who answered, call either of my servants to me. She then came up to me with a wrathful countenance. Do you call your servants, sir, to hinder me, between you, from going where I please? Don't, my dearest life, misinterpret every thing I do. Can you think me so mean and unworthy as to employ a servant to constrain you? I call him to send to the public houses or inns in this town, to inquire after Captain Tomlinson, who may have alighted at some one of them, and be now perhaps needlessly adjusting his dress. And I would have him come, were he to be without clothes, God forgive me, for I am stabbed to the heart by your cruelty. Answer was returned that neither of my servants was in the way. Not in the way, said I. Whither can the dogs be gone? O sir, with a scornful air, not far, I'll warrant. One of them was under the window just now, according to order, I suppose, to watch my steps. But I will do what I please, and go where I please, and that to your face. God forbid that I should hinder you in any thing that you may do with safety to yourself. Now I verily believe that her design was to slip out, in pursuance of the closet whispering between her and Miss Rawlins, perhaps to Miss Rawlins' house. She then stepped back to Mrs. Moore, and gave her something, which proved to be a diamond ring, and desired her, not whisperingly, but with an air of defiance to me, that might be a pledge for her till she defrayed her demands, which she should soon find means to do, having no more money about her than she might have occasion for before she came to an acquaintance's. Mrs. Moore would have declined taking it, but she would not be denied, and then, wiping her eyes, she put on her gloves. Nobody has a right to stop me, said she. I will go. Whom should I be afraid of? Her very question, charming creature, testifying her fear. I beg pardon, madam, turning to Mrs. Moore, and curtsying, for the trouble I have given you. I beg pardon, madam, to Miss Rawlins, curtsying likewise to her. You may both hear of me in a happier hour, if such a one fall to my lot. And God bless you both. Struggling with her tears till she sobbed, and away was tripping. I stepped to the door. I put it to, and setting my back against it, took her struggling hand. My dearest life, my angel, said I, why will you thus distress me? Is this the forgiveness which you so solemnly promised? Unhand me, Sir! You have no business with me. You have no right over me. You know you have not. But whither, my dearest love, would you go? Think you not that I will follow you, were it to the world's end? Whither would you go? Well do you ask me whither I would go, who have been the occasion that I have not a friend left. But God, who knows my innocence and my upright intentions, will not wholly abandon me when I am out of your power. But while I am in it, I cannot expect a gleam of the divine grace or favour to reach me. How severe is this! How shockingly severe! Out of your presence, my angry fair one, I can neither hope for the one nor the other. As my cousin Montague, in the letter you have read, observes, you are my polar star and my guide, and if ever I am to be happy, either here or hereafter, it must be in and by you. She would then have opened the door, but I respectfully opposing her. Begone, man! Begone, Mr. Lovelace, said she. Stop not in my way. If you would not that I should attempt the window, give me passage by the door. For once more, you have no right to detain me. Your resentments, my dearest life, I will own to be well grounded. I will acknowledge that I have been all in fault, on my knee, and down I dropped. I ask your pardon. And can you refuse to ratify your own promise? Look forward to the happy prospect before us. See you not my Lord M. and Lady Sarah longing to bless you, for blessing me and their whole family? Can you take no pleasure in the promised visit of Lady Betty and my cousin Montague? And in the protection they offer you, if you are dissatisfied with mine? Have you no wish to see your uncle's friend? Stay only till Captain Tomlinson comes. Receive from him the news of your uncle's compliance with the wishes of both. She seemed altogether distressed, was ready to sink, and forced to lean against the wainscot, as I kneeled at her feet. A stream of tears at last burst from her less indignant eyes. Good heavens, said she, lifting up her lovely face, and clasped hands, what is at last to be my destiny? Deliver me from this dangerous man, and direct me, I know not what to do, what I can do, nor what I ought to do. The women, as I had owned our marriage to be but half completed, heard nothing in this whole scene to contradict, not flagrantly to contradict, what I had asserted. They believed they saw in her returning temper and staggered resolution a love for me, which her indignation had before suppressed, and they joined to persuade her to tarry till the Captain came, and to hear his proposals, representing the dangers to which she would be exposed, the fatigue she might endure, a lady of her appearance, unguarded, unprotected. On the other hand, they dwelt upon my declared contrition, and on my promises, for the performance of which they offered to be bound. So much had my kneeling humility affected them. Women, Jack, tacitly acknowledge the inferiority of their sex, in the pride they take to behold a kneeling lover at their feet. She turned from me, and threw herself into a chair. I arose and approached her with reverence. My dearest creature, said I, and was proceeding, but with a face glowing with conscious dignity, she interrupted me. Ungenerous, ungrateful Lovelace! You know not the value of the heart you have insulted, nor can you conceive how much my soul despises your meanness. But meanness must ever be the portion of the man who can act vilely. The women, believing we were likely to be on better terms, retired. The dear perverse opposed their going, but they saw I was desirous of their absence. And when they had withdrawn, I once more threw myself at her feet, and acknowledged my offences, implored her forgiveness for this one time, and promised the most exact circumspection for the future. It was impossible for her, she said, to keep her memory and forgive me. What hadst thou seen in the conduct of Clarissa Harlowe, that should encourage such an insult upon her as thou didst dare to make? How meanly must thou think of her, that thou couldst presume to be so guilty, and expect her to be so weak as to forgive thee? I besought her to let me read over to her Captain Tomlinson's letter. I was sure it was impossible she could have given it the requisite attention. I have given it the requisite attention, said she, and the other letters too, so that what I say is upon deliberation. And what have I to fear from my brother and sister? They can but complete the ruin of my fortunes with my father and uncles. Let them, and welcome. You, sir, I thank you, have lowered my fortunes. But, I bless God, that my mind is not sunk with my fortunes. It is, on the contrary, raised above fortune, and above you. And for half a word they shall have the estate they envied me for, and an acquittal from me of all the expectations from my family that may make them uneasy. I lifted up my hands and eyes in silent admiration of her. My brother, sir, may think me ruined. To the praise of your character, he may think it impossible to be with you, and be innocent. You have but too well justified their harshest censures by every part of your conduct. But now that I have escaped from you, and that I am out of the reach of your mysterious devices, I will wrap myself up in mine own innocence. And then the passionate beauty folded her arms about herself, and leave to time, and to my future circumspection, the re-establishment of my character. Leave me then, sir, pursue me not. Good heaven! Interrupting her. And all this for what? Had I not yielded to your entreaties, forgive me, madam, you could not have carried further your resentments. Wretch! Was it not crime enough to give occasion for those entreaties? Wouldst thou make a merit to me, that thou didst not utterly ruin her whom thou oughtest to have protected? Begone, man, turning from me, her face crimsoned over with passion. See me no more. I cannot bear thee in my sight. Dearest creature! If I forgive thee, Lovelace, and there she stopped. To endeavour, proceeded she, to endeavour by premeditation, by low contrivances, by cries of fire, to terrify a poor creature who had consented to take a wretched chance with thee for life. For Heaven's sake, offering to take her repulsing hand, as she was flying from me towards the closet, what hast thou to do to plead for the sake of Heaven in thy favour, O darkest of human minds? Then turning from me, wiping her eyes, and again turning towards me, but her sweet face half aside, what difficulties hast thou involved me in, that thou hadst a plain path before thee, after thou hadst betrayed me into thy power! At once my mind takes in the whole of thy crooked behaviour. And if thou thinkest of Clarissa Harlowe as her proud heart tells her thou oughtest to think of her, thou wilt seek thy fortunes elsewhere. How often hast thou provoked me to tell thee, that my soul is above thee! For Heaven's sake, Madam, for a soul's sake, which it is in your power to save from perdition, forgive me the past offence. I am the greatest villain on earth, if it was a premeditated one, yet I presume not to excuse myself. On your mercy I throw myself. I will not offer at any plea but that of penitence. See but Captain Tomlinson, see but Lady Betty and my cousin. Let them plead for me. Let them be guarantees for my honour. If Captain Tomlinson come while I stay here, I may see him. But as for you, sir, dearest creature, let me beg of you not to aggravate my offence to the Captain when he comes. Let me beg of you. What askest thou? It is not that I shall be of party against myself, that I shall palliate. Do not charge me, Madam, interrupted I, with villainous premeditation. Do not give such a construction to my offence as may weaken your uncle's opinion, as may strengthen your brother's. She flung from me to the further end of the room. She could go no further. And just then Mrs. Moore came up, and told her that dinner was ready, and that she had prevailed upon Miss Rawlins to give her her company. You must excuse me, Mrs. Moore, said she. Miss Rawlins, I hope, also will, but I cannot eat. I cannot go down. As for you, sir, I suppose you will think it right to depart hence, at least till the gentleman comes whom you expect. I respectfully withdrew into the next room, that Mrs. Moore might acquaint her, I durst not myself, that I was her lodger and boarder, as, whisperingly, I desired that she would. And meeting Miss Rawlins in the passage, Dearest Miss Rawlins, said I, stand my friend. Join with Mrs. Moore to pacify my spouse, if she has any new flights upon my having taken lodgings, and intending to board here. I hope she will have more generosity than to think of hindering a gentlewoman from letting her lodgings. I suppose Mrs. Moore, whom I left with my fair one, had apprized her of this before Miss Rawlins went in. For I heard her say, while I withheld Miss Rawlins, No, indeed, he is much mistaken. Surely he does not think I will. They both expostulated with her, as I could gather from bits and scraps of what they said, for they spake so low that I could not hear any distinct sentence, but from the fair perverse, whose anger made her louder. And to this purpose I heard her deliver herself in answer to different parts of their talk to her. Good Mrs. Moore, dear Miss Rawlins, press me no further. I cannot sit down at table with him. They said something, as I suppose, in my behalf. O the insinuating wretch! What defence have I against a man who, go where I will, can turn every one, even of the virtuous of my sex, in his favour? After something else said, which I heard not distinctly. This is execrable cunning. Were you to know his wicked heart, he is not without hope of engaging you two good persons to second him in the vilest of his machinations. How came she, thought I at the instant, by all this penetration? My devil surely does not play me booty. If I thought he did, I would marry, and live honest, to be even with him. I suppose then they urged the plea which I hinted to Miss Rawlins at going in, that she would not be Mrs. Moore's hindrance, for thus she expressed herself. He will no doubt pay you your own price. You need not question his liberality, but one house cannot hold us. Why, if it would, did I fly from him to seek refuge among strangers? Then, in answer to somewhat else they pleaded, 'Tis a mistake, Madam. I am not reconciled to him. I will believe nothing he says. Has he not given you a flagrant specimen of what a man he is, and of what he is capable, by the disguises you saw him in? My story is too long, and my stay here will be but short, or I could convince you that my resentments against him are but too well founded. I suppose that they pleaded for her leave for my dining with them, for she said, I have nothing to say to that. It is your own house, Mrs. Moore. It is your own table. You may admit whom you please to it, only leave me at my liberty to choose my company. Then in answers, I suppose, to their offer of sending her up a plate, a bit of bread, if you please, and a glass of water. That's all I can swallow at present. I am really very much discomposed. Saw you not how bad I was? Indignation only could have supported my spirits. I have no objections to his dining with you, Madam, added she, in reply, I suppose, to a further question of the same nature. But I will not stay a night in the same house where he lodges. I presume Miss Rawlins had told her that she would not stay dinner, for she said, Let me not deprive Mrs. Moore of your company, Miss Rawlins. You will not be displeased with his talk. He can have no design upon you. Then I suppose they pleaded what I might say behind her back, to make my own story good. I care not what he says, or what he thinks of me. Repentance and amendment are all the harm I wish him, whatever becomes of me. By her accent she wept when she spoke these last words. They came out both of them wiping their eyes, and would have persuaded me to relinquish the lodgings, and to depart till her uncle's friend came. But I knew better. I did not care to trust the devil, well as she and Miss Howe supposed me to be acquainted with him, for finding her out again, if once more she escaped me. What I am most afraid of is, that she will throw herself among her own relations. And if she does, I am confident they will not be able to withstand her affecting eloquence. But yet, as thou'lt see, the Captain's letter to me is admirably calculated to obviate my apprehensions on this score, particularly in that passage where it is said, that her uncle thinks not himself at liberty to correspond directly with her, or to receive applications from her, but through Captain Tomlinson, as is strongly implied. I must own, notwithstanding the revenge I have so solemnly vowed, that I would very fain have made for her a merit with myself in her returning favour, and have owed as little as possible to the mediation of Captain Tomlinson. My pride was concerned in this, and this was one of my reasons for not bringing him with me. Another was, that, if I were obliged to have recourse to his assistance, I should be better able, by visiting without him, to direct him what to say or do, as I should find out the turn of her humour. I was, however, glad at my heart, that Mrs. Moore came up so seasonably with notice that dinner was ready. The fair fugitive was all in all. She had the excuse for withdrawing, I had time to strengthen myself, the Captain had time to come, and the lady to cool. Shakespeare advises well. Oppose not rage while rage is in its force, but give it way a while, and let it waste. The rising deluge is not stopped with dams, those it o'erbears and drowns the hope of harvest. But wisely managed, its divided strength is sluiced in channels and securely drained, and when its force is spent and unsupplied, the residue with mounds may be restrained, and dry-shod we may pass the naked ford. I went down with the women to dinner. Mrs. Moore sent her fair boarder up a plate, but she only ate a little bit of bread, and drank a glass of water. I doubted not but she would keep her word, when it was once gone out. Is she not an Harlowe? She seems to be inuring herself to hardships, which at the worst she can never know; since, though she should ultimately refuse to be obliged to me, or, to express myself more suitable to my own heart, to oblige me, every one who sees her must befriend her. But let me ask thee, Belford, art thou not solicitous for me in relation to the contents of the letter which the angry beauty had written and dispatched away by man and horse, and for what may be Miss Howe's answer to it? Art thou not ready to inquire whether it be not likely that Miss Howe, when she knows of her saucy friend's flight, will be concerned about her letter, which she must know could not be at Wilson's till after that flight, and so, probably, would fall into my hands? All these things, as thou'lt see in the sequel, are provided for with as much contrivance as human foresight can admit. I have already told thee that Will is upon the look out for old Grimes. Old Grimes is, it seems, a gossiping, sottish rascal; and if Will can but light of him, I'll answer for the consequence. For has not Will been my servant upwards of 7 years? End of Letter XXVI. Letter XXVII Of Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson. Letter XXVII. Miss Lovelace, in continuation. We had at dinner, besides Miss Rawlins, a young widow niece of Mrs. Moore, who is come to stay a month with her aunt. Bevis her name, very forward, very lively, and a great admirer of me, I assure you, hanging smirkingly upon all I said, and prepared to approve of every word before I spoke, and who by the time we had half dined, by the help of what she had collected before, was as much acquainted with our story as either of the other two. As it behoved me to prepare them in my favour against whatever might come from Miss Howe, I improved upon the hint I had thrown out above stairs against that mischief-making lady. I represented her to be an arrogant creature, revengeful, artful, enterprising, and one who, had she been a man, would have sworn and cursed, and committed rapes, and played the devil, as far as I knew. I have no doubt of it, Jack. But who, by advantage of a female education, and pride and insolence, I believed was personally virtuous. Mrs. Bevis allowed that there was a vast deal in education, and in pride too, she said, while Miss Rawlins came with a prudish God forbid that virtue should be owing to education only. However, I declared that Miss Howe was a subtle contriver of mischief, one who had always been my enemy. Her motives I knew not, but despised the man whom her mother was desirous she should have, one Hickman, although I did not directly aver that she would rather have had me. Yet they all immediately imagined that that was the ground of her animosity to me, and of her envy to my beloved. And it was pity, they said, that so fine a young lady did not see through such a pretended friend. And yet nobody, added I, has more reason than she to know by experience the force of a hatred founded in envy, as I hinted to you above, Mrs. Moore, and to you, Miss Rawlins, in the case of her sister Arabella. I had compliments made to my person and talents on this occasion, which gave me a singular opportunity of displaying my modesty, by disclaiming the merit of them, with a No, indeed! I should be very vain, ladies, if I thought so. While thus abusing myself and exalting Miss Howe, I got their opinion both for modesty and generosity, and had all the graces which I disclaimed thrown in upon me besides. In short, they even oppressed that modesty which, to speak modestly of myself, their praises created, by disbelieving all I said against myself. And truly I must needs say, they have almost persuaded even me myself, that Miss Howe is actually in love with me. I have often been willing to hope this, and who knows but she may? The Captain and I have agreed, that it shall be so insinuated occasionally. And what's thy opinion, Jack? She certainly hates Hickman, and girls who are disengaged seldom hate, though they may not love. And if she had rather have another, why not that other me? For am I not a smart fellow and a rake? And do not your sprightly ladies love your smart fellow and your rakes? And where is the wonder that the man who could engage the affections of Miss Harlowe should engage those of a lady with her alasses, who would be honoured in being deemed her second? Nor accuse thou me of singular vanity in this presumption, Belford. Wert thou to know the secret vanity that lurks in the hearts of those who disguise or cloak it best, thou wouldst find great reason to acquit, at least to allow for me; since it is generally the conscious overfullness of conceit that makes the hypocrite most upon his guard to conceal it. Yet with these fellows, proudly humble as they are, it will break out sometimes in spite of their cloaks, though but in self-denying, compliment-begging self-degradation. But now I have undervalued myself in apologizing to thee on this occasion, let me use another argument in favour of my observation, that the ladies generally prefer a rake to a sober man, and of my presumption upon it, that Miss Howe is in love with me. It is this. Common fame says, that Hickman is a very virtuous, a very innocent fellow; a male virgin, I warrant. An odd dog I always thought him. Now women, Jack, like not novices. Two maidenheads meeting together in wedlock, the first child must be a fool, is their common aphorism. They are pleased with a love of the sex that is founded in the knowledge of it. Reason good. Novices expect more than they can possibly find in the commerce with them. The man who knows them, yet has ardours for them, to borrow a word from Miss Howe, though those ardours are generally owing more to the devil within him than to the witch without him, is the man who makes them the highest and most grateful compliment. He knows what to expect, and with what to be satisfied. Then the merit of a woman, in some cases, must be ignorance, whether real or pretended. The man, in these cases, must be an adept. Will it then be wondered at, that a woman prefers a libertine to a novice? While she expects in the one the confidence she wants, she considers the other and herself as two parallel lines, which, though they run side by side, can never meet. Yet in this the sex is generally mistaken too, for these sheepish fellows are sly. I myself was modest once, and this, as I have elsewhere hinted to thee, has better enabled me to judge of both sexes. But to proceed with my narrative. Having thus prepared every one against any letter should come from Miss Howe, and against my beloved's messenger returns, I thought it proper to conclude that subject with a hint, that my spouse could not bear to have any thing said that reflected upon Miss Howe, and, with a deep sigh, added, that I had been made very unhappy more than once by the ill will of ladies whom I had never offended. The widow Bevis believed that might very easily be. Will, both without and within, for I intend he shall fall in love with widow Moore's maid, and have saved £100 in my service at least, will be great helps, as things may happen. End of Letter XXVII. Letter XXVIII Of Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson. Letter XXVIII. Mr. Lovelace, in continuation. We had hardly dined, when my coachman, who kept a look out for Captain Tomlinson, as Will did for old Grimes, conducted hither that worthy gentleman, attended by one servant, both on horseback. He alighted. I went out to meet him at the door. Thou knowest his solemn appearance and unblushing freedom, and yet canst not imagine what a dignity the rascal assumed, nor how respectful to him I was. I led him into the parlour, and presented him to the women, and them to him. I thought it highly imported me, as they might still have some diffidences about our marriage, from my fair one's home-pushed questions on that head, to convince them entirely of the truth of all I had asserted. And how could I do this better than by dialoguing a little with him before them? Dear Captain, I thought you long, for I have had a terrible conflict with my spouse. Captain. I am sorry that I am later than my intention. My account with my banker, there's a dog Jack, took me up longer time to adjust than I had foreseen, all the time pulling down and stroking his ruffles, for there was a small difference between us, only £20 indeed, which I had taken no account of. The rascal has not seen £20 of his own these 10 years. Then had we between us the character of the Harlowe family. I railed against them all, the Captain taking his dear friend Mr. John Harlowe's part, with a not so fast, young gentleman, and the like free assumptions. He accounted for their animosity by my defiances. No good family having such a charming daughter would care to be defied instead of courted. He must speak his mind, never was a double-tongued man. He appealed to the ladies if he were not right. He got them on his side. The correction I had given the brother, he told me, must have aggravated matters. How valiant this made me look to the women! The sex love us mettled fellows at their hearts. Be that as it would, I should never love any of the family but my spouse, and wanting nothing from them, I would not, but for her sake, have gone so far as I had gone towards a reconciliation. This was very good of me, Mrs. Moore said. Very good indeed, Miss Rawlins. Good! It is more than good, it is very generous, said the widow. Captain. Why, so it is, I must needs say. For I am sensible that Mr. Lovelace has been rudely treated by them all, more rudely than it could have been imagined a man of his quality and spirit would have put up with. But then, sir, turning to me, I think you are amply rewarded in such a lady, and that you ought to forgive the father for the daughter's sake. Mrs. Moore. Indeed, so I think. Miss R. So must every one think who has seen the lady. Widow B. A fine lady, to be sure, but she has a violent spirit, and some very odd humours too, by what I have heard. The value of good husbands is not known till they are lost. Her conscience then drew a sigh from her. Lovelace. Nobody must reflect upon my angel. An angel she is. Some little blemishes, indeed, as to her over-hasty spirit, and as to her unforgiving temper. But this she has from the Harlowes, instigated too by that Miss Howe. But her innumerable excellencies are all her own. Captain. Ay, talk of spirit, there's a spirit, now you have named Miss Howe. And so I led him to confirm all I had said of that vixen. Yet she was to be pitied too, looking with meaning at me. As I have already hinted, I had before agreed with him to impute secret love occasionally to Miss Howe, as the best means to invalidate all that might come from her in my disfavour. Captain. Mr. Lovelace, but that I know your modesty, or you could give a reason. Lovelace, looking down, and very modest. I can't think so, Captain, but let us call another cause. Every woman present could look me in the face, so bashful was I. Captain. Well, but as to our present situation, only it mayn't be proper, looking upon me, and round upon the women. Lovelace. O Captain, you may say any thing before this company. Only, Andrew, to my new servant who attended us at table, do you withdraw. This good girl, looking at the maid-servant, will help us to all we want. Away went Andrew, he wanted not his cue, and the maid seemed pleased at my honour's preference of her. Captain. As to our present situation, I say, Mr. Lovelace. Why, sir, we shall be all untwisted, let me tell you, if my friend Mr. John Harlowe were to know what that is. He would as much question the truth of your being married as the rest of the family do. Here the women perked up their ears, and were all silent attention. Captain. I asked you before for particulars, Mr. Lovelace, but you declined giving them. Indeed, it may not be proper for me to be acquainted with them. But I must own, that it is past my comprehension, that a wife can resent any thing a husband can do that is not a breach of the peace, so far as to think herself justified for eloping from him. Lovelace. Captain Tomlinson, sir, I do assure you, that I shall be offended, I shall be extremely concerned, if I hear that word eloping mentioned again. Captain. Your nicety and your love, sir, may make you take offence, but it is my way to call every thing by its proper name, let who will be offended. Thou canst not imagine, Belford, how brave and how independent the rascal looked. Captain. When, young gentleman, you shall think proper to give us particulars, we will find a word for this rash act in so admirable a lady, that shall please you better. You see, sir, that being the representative of my dear friend Mr. John Harlowe, I speak as freely as I suppose he would do, if present. But you blush, sir. I beg your pardon, Mr. Lovelace. It becomes not a modest man to pry into those secrets which a modest man cannot reveal. I did not blush, Jack, but denied not the compliment, and looked down. The women seemed delighted with my modesty, but the widow Bevis was more inclined to laugh at me than praise me for it. Capt. Whatever be the cause of this step, I will not again, Sir, call it elopement, since that harsh word wounds your tenderness, I cannot but express my surprise upon it, when I recollect the affectionate behaviour to which I was witness between you, when I attended you last. Over love, Sir, I think you once mentioned, but over love, smiling, give me leave to say, Sir, it is an odd cause of quarrel. Few ladies. Lovel. Dear Captain! And I tried to blush. The women also tried, and being more used to it, succeeded better. Mrs. Bevis indeed has a red-hot countenance, and always blushes. Miss R. It signifies nothing to mince the matter, but the lady above as good as denies her marriage. You know, Sir, that she does, turning to me. Capt. Denies her marriage! Heavens! How then have I imposed upon my dear friend Mr. John Harlowe? Lovel. Poor dear! But let not her veracity be called into question. She would not be guilty of a wilful untruth for the world. Then I had all their praises again. Lovel. Dear creature! She thinks she has reason for her denial. You know, Mrs. Moore, you know, Miss Rawlins, what I owned to you above as my vow. I looked down, and as once before, turned round my diamond ring. Mrs. Moore looked awry, and with a leer at Miss Rawlins, as to her partner in the hinted at reference. Miss Rawlins looked down as well as I, her eyelids half closed, as if mumbling a paternoster, meditating her snuff box, the distance between her nose and chin lengthened by a close shut mouth. She put me in mind of the pious Mrs. Featherstone, at Oxford, whom I pointed out to thee once, among other grotesque figures, at St. Mary's Church, whither we went to take a view of her two sisters, her eyes shut, not daring to trust her heart with them open, and but just half rearing her lids, to see who the next comer was, and falling them again, when her curiosity was satisfied. The widow Bevis gazed, as if on the hunt for a secret. The Captain looked archly, as if half in the possession of one. Mrs. Moore at last broke the bashful silence. Mrs. Lovelace's behaviour, she said, could be no otherwise so well accounted for, as by the ill offices of that Miss Howe, and by the severity of her relations, which might but too probably have affected her head a little at times, adding, that it was very generous in me to give way to the storm when it was up, rather than to exasperate at such a time. But let me tell you, Sir, said the widow Bevis, that is not what one husband in 1,000 would have done. I desired that no part of this conversation might be hinted to my spouse, and looked still more bashfully. Her great fault, I must own, was over delicacy. The Captain leered round him, and said he believed he could guess from the hints I had given him in town, of my over love, and from what had now passed, that we had not consummated our marriage. O Jack, how sheepishly then I looked, or endeavoured to look, thy friend! How primly Goody Moore, how affectedly Miss Rawlins! While the honest widow Bevis gazed around her fearless, and though only simpering with her mouth, her eyes laughed outright, and seemed to challenge a laugh from every eye in the company. He observed that I was a phoenix of a man, if so, and he could not but hope that all matters would be happily accommodated in a day or two, and that then he should have the pleasure to aver to her uncle that he was present, as he might say, on our wedding day. The women seemed all to join in the same hope. Ah, Captain! Ah, ladies! how happy should I be, if I could bring my dear spouse to be of the same mind! It would be a very happy conclusion of a very knotty affair, said the widow Bevis, and I see not why we may not make this very night a merry one. The Captain superciliously smiled at me. He saw plainly enough, he said, that we had been at children's play hitherto. A man of my character, who could give way to such a caprice as this, must have a prodigious value for his lady. But one thing he would venture to tell me, and that was this, that however desirous young skittish ladies might be to have their way in this particular, it was a very bad setting out for the man, as it gave his bride a very high proof of the power she had over him, and he would engage that no woman, thus humoured, ever valued the man the more for it, but very much the contrary, and there were reasons to be given why she should not. Well, well, Captain, no more of this subject before the ladies. One feels, shrugging my shoulders in a bashful try-to-blush manner, that one is so ridiculous. I have been punished enough for my tender folly. Miss Rawlins had taken her fan, and would needs hide her face behind it, I suppose because her blush was not quite ready. Mrs. Moore hemmed, and looked down, and by that gave hers over. While the jolly widow, laughing out, praised the Captain as one of Hudibras's metaphysicians, repeating, he knew what's what, and that's as high as metaphysic wit can fly. This made Miss Rawlins blush indeed. Fie, fie, Mrs. Bevis, cried she, unwilling, I suppose, to be thought absolutely ignorant. Upon the whole, I began to think that I had not made a bad exchange of our professing mother for the unprofessing Mrs. Moore. And indeed the women and I, and my beloved too, all mean the same thing. We only differ about the manner of coming at the proposed end. End of Letter 28. Letter 29 of Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson, Letter 29. Mr. Lovelace, in continuation. It was now high time to acquaint my spouse that Captain Tomlinson was come, and the rather, as the maid told us, that the lady had asked her if such a gentleman, describing him, was not in the parlour. Mrs. Moore went up and requested in my name that she would give us audience. But she returned, reporting my beloved's desire that Captain Tomlinson would excuse her for the present. She was very ill, her spirits were too weak to enter into conversation with him, and she must lie down. I was vexed, and at first extremely disconcerted. The Captain was vexed too, and my concern, thou mayest believe, was the greater on his account. She had been very much fatigued, I own. Her fits in the morning must have disordered her, and she had carried her resentment so high, that it was the less wonder she should find herself low, when her raised spirits had subsided. Very low, I may say, if sinkings are proportioned to risings, for she had been lifted up above the standard of a common mortal. The Captain, however, sent up his own name, that if he could be admitted to drink one dish of tea with her, he should take it for a favour, and would go to town, and dispatch some necessary business in order, if possible, to leave his morning free to attend her. But she pleaded a violent headache, and Mrs. Moore confirmed the plea to be just. I would have had the Captain lodge there that night, as well in compliment to him, as introductory to my intention of entering myself upon my new-taken apartment. But his hours were of too much importance to him to stay the evening. It was indeed very inconvenient for him, he said, to return in the morning. But he is willing to do all in his power to heal this breach, and that as well for the sakes of me and my lady, as for that of his dear friend Mr. John Harlowe, who must not know how far this misunderstanding had gone. He would therefore only drink one dish of tea with the ladies and me, and accordingly, after he had done so, and I had had a little private conversation with him, he hurried away. His fellow had given him, in the interim, a high character to Mrs. Moore's servants, and this reported by the widow Bevis, who, being no proud woman, is hail fellow well met, as the saying is, with all her aunt's servants. He was a fine gentleman, a discreet gentleman, a man of sense and breeding, with them all, and it was a pity that, with such great business upon his hands, he should be obliged to come again. My life for yours, audibly whispered the widow Bevis. There is humour as well as headache in somebody's declining to see this worthy gentleman. Ah, Lord, how happy might some people be if they would! No perfect happiness in this world, said I, very gravely and with a sigh, for the widow must know that I heard her. If we have not real unhappiness, we can make it, even from the overflowings of our good fortune. Very true, and very true, the two widows. A charming observation, Mrs. Bevis. Miss Rawlins smiled her assent to it, and I thought she called me in her heart charming man, for she professes to be a great admirer of moral observations. I had hardly taken leave of the Captain, and sat down again with the women, when Will came, and calling me out, Sir, sir, said he, grinning with a familiarity in his looks, as if what he had to say entitled him to take liberties, I have got the fellow down. I have got old Grimes. Ha, 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 ha. He is at the lower flask, almost in the condition of David's sow, and please your honour, the dog himself not much better. Here's his letter from Miss Howe. Ha, 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 laughed the varlet, holding it fast, as if to make conditions with me, and to excite my praises as well as my impatience. I could have knocked him down, but he would have his say out. Old Grimes knows not that I have the letter. I must get back to him before he misses it. I only make a pretence to go out for a few minutes, but, and then the dog laughed again. He must stay, old Grimes must stay, till I go back to pay the reckoning. Damn the prater, grinning rascal! The letter, the letter! He gathered in his wide mouth, as he calls it, and gave me the letter, but with a strut rather than a bow, and then sidled off like one of widow Sorling's dunghill cocks, exulting after a great feat performed. And all the time that I was holding up the billet to the light, to try to get at its contents without breaking the seal, for dispatched in a hurry it had no cover, there stood he, laughing, shrugging, playing off his legs, now stroking his shining chin, now turning his hat upon his thumb, then leering in my face, flourishing with his head. O Christ! Now and then cried the rascal, what joy has this dog in mischief? More than I can have in the completion of my most favourite purposes. These fellows are ever happier than their masters. I was once thinking to rumple up this billet till I had broken the seal. Young families, Miss Howe's is not an ancient one, love ostentatious sealings, and it might have been supposed to have been squeezed in pieces in old Grimes's breeches pocket. But I was glad to be saved the guilt as well as suspicion of having a hand in so dirty a trick, for thus much of the contents, enough for my purpose. I was unable to scratch out in character without it, the folds depriving me only of a few connecting words, which I have supplied between hooks. My Miss Harlowe, thou knowest, had before changed her name to Miss Laetitia Beaumont. Another alias now Jack to it, for this billet was directed to her by the name of Mrs. Harriet Lucas. I have learned her to be half a rogue, thou seest. I congratulate you, my dear, with all my heart and soul, upon your escape from the villain. I long for the particulars of all. My mother is out, but expecting her return every minute, I dispatch your messenger instantly. I will endeavour to come at Mrs. Townsend without loss of time, and will write at large in a day or two, if in that time I can see her. Meantime, I am excessively uneasy for a letter I sent you yesterday by Collins, who must have left it at Wilson's after you got away. It is of very great importance. I hope the villain has it not. I would not for the world that he should. Immediately send for it, if by doing so the place you are at will not be discovered. If he has it, let me know it by some way out of hand. If not, you need not send. Ever yours, A.H. June 9th. O Jack, what heart's ease does this interception give me! I sent the rascal back with the letter to old Grimes, and charged him to drink no deeper. He owned that he was half seas over, as he phrased it. Dog, said I, are you not to court one of Mrs. Moore's maids to night? Cry your mercy, sir, I will be sober. I had forgot that. But old Grimes is plaguy tough. I thought I should never have got him down. Away, villain! Let old Grimes come, and on horseback too, to the door. He shall, and please your honour, if I can get him on the saddle, and if he can sit. And charge him not to have alighted, nor to have seen any body. Enough, sir, familiarly nodding his head, to show he took me. And away went the villain. Into the parlour, to the women, I. In a quarter of an hour came old Grimes on horseback, waving to his saddle bow, now on this side, now on that, his head at others joining to that of his more sober beast. It looked very well to the women that I made no effort to speak to old Grimes, though I wished before them that I knew the contents of what he brought, but on the contrary desired that they would instantly let my spouse know that her messenger was returned. Down she flew. Violently she had the headache. Oh, how I prayed for an opportunity to be revenged of her for the ungrateful trouble she had given to her uncle's friend. She took the letter from old Grimes with her own hands, and retired to an inner parlour to read it. She presently came out again to the fellow, who had much ado to sit his horse. Here's your money, friend. I thought you long. But what shall I do to get somebody to go to town immediately for me? I see you cannot. Old Grimes took his money, let fall his hat in doffing it, had it given him, and rode away, his eyes isinglass, and set in his head, as I saw through the window, and in a manner speechless, all his language hiccup. My dog needed not to have gone so deep with this tough old Grimes, but the rascal was in his kingdom with him. The lady applied to Mrs. Moore. She mattered not the price. Could a man and horse be engaged for her? Only to go for a letter left for her at one Mr. Wilson's in Pall Mall. A poor neighbour was hired, a horse procured for him, he had his directions. In vain did I endeavour to engage my beloved, when she was below. Her headache, I suppose, returned. She, like the rest of her sex, can be ill or well when she pleases. I see her drift, thought I. It is to have all her lights from Miss Howe before she resolves, and to take her measures accordingly. Up she went, expressing great impatience about the letter she had sent for, and desired Mrs. Moore to let her know if I offered to send any one of my servants to town. To get at the letter, I suppose, was her fear. But she might have been quite easy on that head, and yet perhaps would not, had she known that the worthy Captain Tomlinson, who will be in town before her messenger, will leave there the important letter, which I hope will help to pacify her, and reconcile her to me. O Jack, Jack! Thinkest thou that I will take all this roguish pains, and be so often called villain for nothing? But yet, is it not taking pains to come at the finest creature in the world, not for a transitory moment only, but for one of our lives? The struggle only, whether I am to have her in my own way, or in hers. But now I know thou wilt be frightened out of thy wits for me. What, Lovelace! Wouldst thou let her have a letter that will inevitably blow thee up, and blow up the mother and all her nymphs, yet not intend to reform, nor intend to marry? Patience, puppy! Canst thou not trust thy master? End of Letter 29. Letter 30 of Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson. Letter 30. Mr. Lovelace, in continuation. I went up to my new-taken apartment, and fell to writing in character, as usual. I thought I had made good my quarters, But the cruel creature, understanding that I intended to take up my lodgings there, declared with so much violence against it, that I was obliged to submit, and to accept of another lodging, about 12 doors off, which Mrs. Moore recommended. And all the advantage I could obtain was, that Will, unknown to my spouse, and for fear of a freak, should lie in the house. Mrs. Moore, indeed, was unwilling to disoblige either of us. But Miss Rawlins was of opinion that nothing more ought to be allowed me, and yet Mrs. Moore owned that the refusal was a strange piece of tyranny to a husband, if I were a husband. I had a good mind to make Miss Rawlins smart for it. Come and see Miss Rawlins, Jack, if thou likest her. I'll get her for thee with a wet finger, as the saying is. The widow Bevis indeed stickled hard for me. An innocent or injured man will have friends everywhere. She said that to bear much with some wives was to be obliged to bear more, and I reflected with a sigh that tame spirits must always be imposed upon. And then in my heart I renewed my vows of revenge upon this haughty and perverse beauty. The second fellow came back from town about 9 o'clock with Miss Howe's letter of Wednesday last. Collins, it seems, when he left it, had desired that it might be safely and speedily delivered into Miss Laetitia Beaumont's own hands. But Wilson, understanding that neither she nor I were in town, he could not know of our difference, thou must think, resolved to take care of it till our return, in order to give it into one of our own hands, and now delivered it to her messenger. This was told her. Wilson, I doubt not, is in her favour upon it. She took the letter with great eagerness, opened it in a hurry, I am glad she did, yet I believe all was right, before Mrs. Moore and Mrs. Bevis. Miss Rawlins was gone home, and said she would not for the world that I should have had that letter, for the sake of her dear friend the writer, who had written to her very uneasily about it. Her dear friend, repeated Mrs. Bevis, when she told me this. Such mischief-makers are always deemed dear friends, till they are found out. The widow says that I am the finest gentleman she ever beheld. I have found a warm kiss now and then very kindly taken. I might be a very wicked fellow, Jack, if I were to do all the mischief in my power. But I am evermore for quitting a too easy prey to reptile rakes. What but difficulty, though the lady is an angel, engages me to so much perseverance here? And here, conquer or die, is now the determination. I have just now parted with this honest widow. She called upon me at my new lodgings. I told her that I saw I must be further obliged to her in the course of this difficult affair. She must allow me to make her a handsome present when all was happily over. But I desired that she would take no notice of what should pass between us, not even to her aunt, for that she, as I saw, was in the power of Miss Rawlins, and Miss Rawlins, being a maiden gentlewoman, knew not the right and the fit in matrimonial matters, as she, my dear widow, did. Very true. How should she? Said Mrs. Bevis, proud of knowing nothing. But for her part she desired no present. It was enough if she could contribute to reconcile man and wife, and disappoint mischief-makers. She doubted not that such an envious creature as Miss Howe was glad that Mrs. Lovelace had eloped. Jealousy and love was old Nick. See, Belford, how charmingly things work between me and my new acquaintance, the widow. Who knows but that she may, after a little further intimacy, though I am banished the house on nights, contrive a midnight visit for me to my spouse, when all is still and fast asleep. Where can a woman be safe who has once entered the lists with a contriving and intrepid lover? But as to this letter, methinkest thou sayest, of Miss Howe, I knew thou wouldst be uneasy for me. But did not I tell thee that I had provided for every thing? That I always took care to keep seals entire, and to preserve covers? Was it not easy then, thinkest thou, to contrive a shorter letter out of a longer, and to copy the very words? I can tell thee it was so well ordered, that, not being suspected to have been in my hands, it was not easy to find me out. Had it been my beloved's hand, there would have been no imitating it for such a length. Her delicate and even mind is seen in the very cut of her letters. Miss Howe's hand is no bad one, but it is not so equal and regular. That little devil's natural impatience hurrying on her fingers gave, I suppose, from the beginning, her handwriting, as well as the rest of her, its fits and starts, and those peculiarities which, like strong muscular lines in a face, neither the pen nor the pencil can miss. Hast thou a mind to see what it was I permitted Miss Howe to write to her lovely friend? Why then read it here, so extracted from hers of Wednesday last, with a few additions of my own, the additions underscored. My dearest friend, you will perhaps think that I have been too long silent, but I had begun 2 letters at different times since my last, and written a great deal each time, and with spirit enough, I assure you, incensed as I was against the abominable wretch you are with, particularly on reading yours of the 21st of the past month. The first I intended to keep open till I could give you some account of my proceedings with Mrs. Townsend. It was some days before I saw her, and this intervenient space giving me time to reperuse what I had written, I thought it proper to lay that aside, and to write in a style a little less fervent, for you would have blamed me, I knew, for the freedom of some of my expressions, execrations, if you please. And when I had gone a good way in the second, and changed your prospects, on his communicating to you Miss Montague's letter, and his better behaviour, occasioning a change in your mind, I laid that aside also. And in this uncertainty thought I would wait to see the issue of affairs between you before I wrote again, believing that all would soon be decided one way or other. Here I was forced to break off. I am too little my own mistress. My mother is always up and down, and watching as if I were writing to a fellow. What need I, she asked me, lock myself in, if I am only reading past correspondences? For that is my pretence, when she comes poking in with her face sharpened to an edge, as I may say, by a curiosity that gives her more pain than pleasure. The Lord forgive me, but I believe I shall huff her next time she comes in. Do you forgive me too, my dear? My mother ought, because she says I am my father's girl, and because I am sure I am hers. Upon my life, my dear, I am sometimes of opinion that this vile man was capable of meaning you dishonour. When I look back upon his past conduct, I cannot help, and verily believe, that he has laid aside such thoughts. My reasons for both opinions I will give you. For the worst, to wit, that he had it once in his head to take you at advantage if he could. I consider that pride, revenge, and a delight to tread in unbeaten paths, are principal ingredients in the character of this finished libertine. He hates all your family, yourself excepted, yet is a savage in love. His pride, and the credit which a few plausible qualities sprinkled among his odious ones have given him, have secured him too good a reception from our eye-judging, our undistinguishing, our self-flattering, our too-confiding sex, to make assiduity and obsequiousness, and a conquest of his unruly passions, any part of his study. He has some reason for his animosity to all the men, and to one woman of your family. He has always shown you, and his own family too, that he prefers his pride to his interest. He is a declared marriage-hater, a notorious intriguer, full of his inventions and glorying in them. As his vanity had made him imagine that no woman could be proof against his love, no wonder that he struggled, like a lion held in toils, against a passion that he thought not returned. Hence, perhaps, it is not difficult to believe that it became possible for such a wretch as this to give way to his old prejudices against marriage, and to that revenge which had always been a first passion with him. And hence we may account for his delays, his teasing ways, his bringing you to bear with his lodging in the same house, his making you pass to the other people of it as his wife, his bringing you into the company of his libertine companions, the attempt of imposing upon you that Miss Partington for a bedfellow, etc. My reasons for a contrary opinion, to wit, that he is now resolved to do you all the justice in his power to do you, are these: that he sees that all his own family have warmly engaged themselves in your cause, that the horrid wretch loves you, with such a love, however, as Herod loved his Marianne, that, on inquiry, I found it to be true, that Counsellor Williams, whom Mr. Hickman knows to be a man of eminence in his profession, has actually as good as finished the settlements, that 2 drafts of them have been made, one avowedly to be sent to this very Captain Tomlinson, and I find that a license has actually been more than once endeavoured to be obtained, and that difficulties have hitherto been made, equally to Lovelace's vexation and disappointment. My mother's proctor, who is very intimate with the proctor applied to by the wretch, has come at this information in confidence, and hints that, as Mr. Lovelace is a man of high fortunes, these difficulties will probably be got over. I had once resolved to make strict inquiry about Tomlinson, and still, if you will, your uncle's favourite housekeeper may be sounded at a distance. I know that the matter is so laid that Mrs. Hodges is supposed to know nothing of the treaty set on foot by means of Captain Tomlinson. But your uncle is an old man, and old men imagine themselves to be under obligation to their paramours, if younger than themselves, and seldom keep anything from their knowledge. Yet methinks there can be no need, since Tomlinson, as you describe him, is so good a man, and so much of a gentleman, the end to be answered by his being an impostor so much more than necessary, if Lovelace has villainy in his head. And thus what he communicated to you of Mr. Hickman's application to your uncle, and of Mrs. Norton's to your mother, some of which particulars I am satisfied his vile agent Joseph Leman could not reveal to his viler employer, his pushing on the marriage day in the name of your uncle, which it could not answer any wicked purpose for him to do, and what he writes of your uncle's proposal, to have it thought that you were married from the time that you had lived in one house together, and that to be made to agree with the time of Mr. Hickman's visit to your uncle, the insisting on a trusty person's being present at the ceremony, at that uncle's nomination, these things make me assured that he now at last means honourably. But if any unexpected delay should happen on his side, acquaint me, my dear, with the very street where Mrs. Sinclair lives, and where Mrs. Fretchville's house is situated, which I cannot find that you have ever mentioned in your former letters, which is a little odd, and I will make strict inquiries of them, and of Tomlinson too, and I will, if your heart will let you take my advice, soon procure you a refuge from him with Mrs. Townsend. But why do I now, when you seem to be in so good a train, puzzle and perplex you with my retrospections? and yet they may be of use to you, if any delay happen on his part. But that, I think, cannot well be. What you have therefore now to do is so to behave to this proud-spirited wretch as may banish from his mind all remembrance of past disobligations, and to receive his addresses as those of a betrothed lover. You will incur the censure of prudery and affectation if you keep him at that distance which you have hitherto kept him at. His sudden, and a suddenly recovered, illness has given him an opportunity to find out that you love him. Alas, my dear, I knew you loved him. He has seemed to change his nature, and is all love and gentleness. And no more quarrels now, I beseech you. I am very angry with him, nevertheless, for the freedoms which he took with your person, and I think some guard is necessary, as he is certainly an encroacher. But indeed all men are so, and you are such a charming creature, and have kept him at such a distance. But no more of this subject. Only, my dear, be not over nice, now you are so near the state. You see what difficulties you laid yourself under, when Tomlinson's letter called you again into the wretch's company. If you meet with no impediments, no new causes of doubt, your reputation in the eye of the world is concerned that you should be his, and, as your uncle rightly judges, be thought to have been his before now. And yet, let me tell you, I can hardly bear to think that these libertines should be rewarded for their villainy with the best of the sex, when the worst of it are too good for them. I shall send this long letter by Collins, who changes his day to oblige me. As none of our letters by Wilson's conveyance have miscarried, when you have been in more apparently disagreeable situations than you are in at present, I have no doubt that this will go safe. Miss Lardner, whom you have seen at her cousin Biddle's, saw you at St. James's Church on Sunday was fortnight. She kept you in her eye during the whole time, but could not once obtain the notice of yours, though she curtsied to you twice. She thought to pay her compliments to you when the service was over, for she doubted not but you were married, and for an odd reason, because you came to church by yourself. Every eye, as usual wherever you are, she said was upon you, and this seeming to give you hurry, and you being nearer the door than she, you slid out before she could get to you. But she ordered her servant to follow you till you were housed. This servant saw you step into a chair which waited for you, and you ordered the men to carry you to the place where they took you up. She describes the house as a very genteel house, and fit to receive people of fashion, and what makes me mention this is that perhaps you will have a visit from her, or message at least. So that you have Mr. Dolman's testimony to the credit of the house and people you are with, and he is a man of fortune and some reputation, formerly a rake indeed, but married to a woman of family, and having had a palsy blow, one would think a penitent. You have also Mr. Mennell's at least passive testimony, Mr. Tomlinson's, and now lastly Miss Lardner's, so that there will be the less need for inquiry. But you know my busy and inquisitive temper, as well as my affection for you, and my concern for your honour. But all doubt will soon be lost in certainty. Nevertheless, I must add, that I would have you command me up, if I can be of the least service or pleasure to you. I value not fame, I value not censure, nor even life itself, I verily think, as I do your honour and your friendship. For is not your honour my honour? And is not your friendship the pride of my life? May Heaven preserve you, my dearest creature, in honour and safety, is the prayer, the hourly prayer, of your ever faithful and affectionate Anna Howe. Thursday morning, 5th. I have written all night. Excuse indifferent writing. My crow-quills are worn to the stumps, and I must get a new supply. These ladies always write with crow-quills, Jack. If thou art capable of taking in all my providences, in this letter thou wilt admire my sagacity and contrivance almost as much as I do myself. Thou seest that Miss Lardner, Mrs. Sinclair, Tomlinson, Mrs. Fretchville, Mennell, are all mentioned in it. My first liberties with her person also. Modesty, modesty, Belford, I doubt, is more confined to time, place, and occasion, even by the most delicate minds, than these minds would have it believed to be. And why all these taken notice of by me from the genuine letter, but for fear some future letter from the vixen should escape my hands, in which she might refer to these names? And if none of them were to have been found in this that is to pass for hers, I might be routed horse and foot, as Lord M. would phrase it in a like case. Devilish hard, and yet I may thank myself to be put to all this plague and trouble. And for what dost thou ask, O Jack? For a triumph of more value to me beforehand than an imperial crown. Don't ask me the value of it a month hence. But what indeed is an imperial crown itself, when a man is used to it? Miss Howe might well be anxious about the letter she wrote. Her sweet friend, from what I have let pass of hers, has reason to rejoice in the thought that it fell not into my hands. And now must all my contrivances be set at work, to intercept the expected letter from Miss Howe, which is, as I suppose, to direct her to a place of safety, and out of my knowledge. Mrs. Townsend is no doubt in this case to smuggle her off. I hope the villain, as I am so frequently called between these two girls, will be able to manage this point. But what perhaps thou askest, if the lady should take it into her head, by the connivance of Miss Rawlins, to quit this house privately in the night? I have thought of this, Jack. Does not Will lie in the house? And is not the widow Bevis my fast friend? End of Letter XXX. Letter XXXI of Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson. Letter 31. Mr. Lovelace to John Belford, Esquire, Saturday, 6 o'clock, June 10th. The lady gave Will's sweetheart a letter last night, to be carried to the post-house, as this morning, directed from Miss Howe, under cover to Hickman. I dare say neither cover nor letter will be seen to have been opened. The contents but 8 lines, to own the receipt of her double-dated letter in safety, and referring to a longer letter which she intends to write when she shall have a quieter heart and less trembling fingers, but mentions something to have happened, my detecting her, she means, which has given her very great flutters, confusions, and apprehensions, but which she will wait the issue of, some hopes for me hence, Jack, before she gives her fresh perturbation or concern on her account. She tells her how impatient she shall be for her next, etc. Now, Belford, I thought it would be but kind in me to save Miss Howe's concern on these alarming hints, since the curiosity of such a spirit must have been prodigiously excited by them. Having therefore so good a copy to imitate, I wrote, and taking out that of my beloved, put under the same cover the following short billet, inscriptive and conclusive parts of it in her own words. Hampstead, Tuesday evening. My ever dear Miss Howe, a few lines only, till calmer spirits and quieter fingers be granted me, and till I can get over the shock which your intelligence has given me, to acquaint you, that your kind long letter of Wednesday, and, as I may say, of Thursday morning, is come safe to my hands. On receipt of yours by my messenger to you, I sent for it from Wilson's. There, thank Heaven, it lay. May that Heaven reward you for all your past, and for all your intended goodness to your for ever obliged Clarissa Harlowe. I took great pains in writing this. It cannot, I hope, be suspected. Her hand is so very delicate, yet hers is written less beautifully than she usually writes, and I hope Miss Howe will allow somewhat for hurry of spirits, and unsteady fingers. My consideration for Miss Howe's ease of mind extended still further than to the instance I have mentioned. That this billet might be with her as soon as possible, and before it could have reached Hickman by the post, I dispatched it away by a servant of Mowbray's. Miss Howe, had there been any failure or delay, might, as thou wilt think, have communicated her anxieties to her fugitive friend, and she to me perhaps in a way I should not have been pleased with. Once more wilt thou wonderingly question, all this pains for a single girl? Yes, Jack, but is not this girl a Clarissa? And who knows but kind fortune, as a reward for my perseverance, may toss me in her charming friend? Less likely things have come to pass, Belford, and to be sure I shall have her, if I resolve upon it. End of Letter XXXI. Letter XXXII of Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson. Letter 32. Mr. Lovelace to John Belford, Esquire, 8 o'clock, Saturday morning, June 10th. I am come back from Mrs. Moore's, whither I went in order to attend my charmer's commands, but no admittance. A very bad night. Doubtless, she must be as much concerned that she has carried her resentment so very far, as I have reason to be that I made such poor use of the opportunity I had on Wednesday night. But now, Jack, for a brief review of my present situation, and a slight hint or two of my precautions. I have seen the women this morning, and find them half right, half doubting. Miss Rawlins's brother tells her that she lives at Mrs. Moore's. Mrs. Moore can do nothing without Miss Rawlins. People who keep lodgings at public places expect to get by every one who comes into their purlieus. Though not permitted to lodge there myself, I have engaged all the rooms she has to spare to the very garrets, and that, as I have told thee before, for a month certain, and at her own price, board included, my spouse's and all. But she must not at present know it. So I hope I have Mrs. Moore fast by the interest. This, devil-like, is suiting temptations to inclinations.
I have always observed, and I believe I have hinted as much formerly, that all dealers, though but for pins, may be taken in by customers for pins, sooner than by a direct bribe of 10 times the value, especially if pretenders to conscience; for the offer of a bribe would not only give room for suspicion, but would startle and alarm their scrupulousness, while a high price paid for what you buy is but submitting to be cheated in the method of the person makes a profession to get by. Have I not said that human nature is a rogue? And do not I know that it is? To give a higher instance, how many proud senators, in the year 1720, were induced, by presents or subscription of South Sea stock, to contribute to a scheme big with national ruin, who yet would have spurned the man who should have presumed to offer them even twice the sum certain that they had a chance to gain by the stock? But to return to my review, and to my precautions. Miss Rawlins fluctuates, as she hears the lady's story, or as she hears mine. Somewhat of an infidel, I doubt, is this Miss Rawlins. I have not yet considered her foible. The next time I see her, I will take particular notice of all the moles and freckles in her mind, and then infer and apply. The widow Bevis, as I have told thee, is all my own. My man Will lies in the house. My other new fellow attends upon me, and cannot therefore be quite stupid. Already is Will over head and ears in love with one of Mrs. Moore's maids. He was struck with her the moment he set his eyes upon her. A raw country wench too. But all women, from the countess to the cook-maid, are put into high good humour with themselves when a man is taken with them at first sight. Be they ever so plain, no woman can be ugly, Jack, they'll find 20 good reasons, besides the great one, for sake's sake, by the help of the glass without, and perhaps in spite of it, and conceit within, to justify the honest fellow's caption. The rogue has saved 150 in my service, more by 50 than I bid him save. No doubt he thinks he might have done so, though I believe not worth a groat. The best of masters I, passionate indeed, but soon appeased. The wench is extremely kind to him already. The other maid is also very civil to him. He has a husband for her in his eye. She cannot but say that Mr. Andrew, my other servant, the girl is for fixing the person, is a very well-spoken, civil young man. We common folks have our joys, and please your honour, says honest Joseph Leman, like as our betters have. And true, says honest Joseph, did I prefer ease to difficulty, I should envy these low-born sinners some of their joys. But if Will had not made amorous pretensions to the wenches, we all know that servants, united in one common compare-note cause, are intimate the moment they see one another. Great genealogists too. They know immediately the whole kin and kin's kin of each other, though dispersed over the 3 kingdoms, as well as the genealogies and kin's kin of those whom they serve. But my precautions end not here. O Jack, with such an invention, what occasion had I to carry my beloved to Mrs. Sinclair's? My spouse may have further occasion for the messengers whom she dispatched, one to Miss Howe, the other to Wilson's. With one of these Will is already well acquainted, as thou hast heard. To mingle liquor is to mingle souls with these fellows. With the other messenger he will soon be acquainted, if he be not already. The captain's servant has his uses and instructions assigned him. I have hinted at some of them already. He also serves a most humane and considerate master. I love to make everybody respected to my power. The post, general, and penny will be strictly watched likewise. Miss Howe's Collins is remembered to be described. Miss Howe's and Hickman's liveries also. James Harlowe and Singleton are warned against. I am to be acquainted with any inquiry that shall happen to be made after my spouse, whether by her married or maiden name, before she shall be told of it, and this that I may have it in my power to prevent mischief. I have ordered Mowbray and Tourville, and Belton, if his health permit, to take their quarters at Hampstead for a week, with their fellows to attend them. I spare thee for the present, because of thy private concerns, but hold thyself in cheerful readiness, however, as a mark of thy allegiance. As to my spouse herself, has she not reason to be pleased with me, for having permitted her to receive Miss Howe's letter from Wilson's? A plain case, either that I am no deep plotter, or that I have no further views than to make my peace with her for an offence so slight and so accidental. Miss Howe says, though prefaced with an alas, that her charming friend loves me. She must therefore yearn after this reconciliation, prospect so fair, if she showed me any compassion, seemed inclinable to spare me, and to make the most favourable construction. I cannot but say, that it would be impossible not to show her some. But to be insulted and defied by a rebel in one's power, what prince can bear that? But I must return to the scene of action. I must keep the women steady. I had no opportunity to talk to my worthy Mrs. Bevis in private. Tomlinson, a dog, not come yet. End of Letter 32. Letter 33 of Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson, Letter 33. Mr. Lovelace to John Belford, Esquire, from my apartments at Mrs. Moore's. Miss Rawlins at her brother's. Mrs. Moore engaged in household matters. Widow Bevis dressing. I have nothing to do but write. This cursed Tomlinson not yet arrived. Nothing to be done without him. I think he shall complain in pretty high language of the treatment he met with yesterday. What are our affairs to him? He can have no view but to serve us. Cruel to send back to town, unaudienced, unseen, a man of his business and importance. He never stirs a foot, but something of consequence depends upon his movements. A confounded thing to trifle thus humoursomely with such a gentleman's moments. These women think that all the business of the world must stand still for their figgeries. A good female word, Jack. The greatest triflers in the creation, to fancy themselves the most important beings in it. Marry come up, as I have heard Goody Sorlings say to her servants, when she has rated at them with mingled anger and disdain. After all, methinks I want those tostications, thou seest how women and women's words fill my mind, to be over, happily over, that I may sit down quietly, and reflect upon the dangers I have passed through, and the troubles I have undergone. I have a reflecting mind, as thou knowest, but the very word reflecting implies all got over. What briars and thorns does the wretch rush into, a scratched face and tattered garments the unavoidable consequence, who will needs be for striking out a new path through overgrown underwood, quitting that beaten out for him by those who have travelled the same road before him. A visit from the widow Bevis in my own apartment. She tells me that my spouse had thoughts last night, after I was gone to my lodgings, of removing from Mrs. Moore's. I almost wish she had attempted to do so. Miss Rawlins, it seems, who was applied to upon it, dissuaded her from it. Mrs. Moore also, though she did not own that Will lay in the house, or rather set up in it, courting, set before her the difficulties which, in her opinion, she would have to get clear of, without my knowledge, assuring her that she could be nowhere more safe than with her, till she had fixed whither to go. And the lady herself recollected that if she went, she might miss the expected letter from her dear friend Miss Howe, which, as she owned, was to direct her future steps. She must also surely have some curiosity to know what her uncle's friend had to say to her from her uncle, contemptuously as she yesterday treated a man of his importance. Nor could she, I should think, be absolutely determined to put herself out of the way of receiving the visits of two of the principal ladies of my family, and to break entirely with me in the face of them all. Besides, whither could she have gone? Moreover, Miss Howe's letter coming, after her elopement, so safely to her hands, must surely put her into a more confiding temper with me, and with every one else, though she would not immediately own it. But these good folks have so little charity, are such severe censurers. Yet who is absolutely perfect? It were to be wished, however, that they would be so modest as to doubt themselves sometimes. Then would they allow for others, as others, excellent as they imagine themselves to be, must for them. Saturday, 1 o'clock. Tomlinson at last is come, forced to ride 5 miles about, though I shall impute his delay to great and important business, to avoid the sight of 2 or 3 impertinent rascals who, little thinking whose affairs he was employed in, wanted to obtrude themselves upon him. I think I will make this fellow easy, if he behave to my liking in this affair. I sent up the moment he came. She desired to be excused receiving his visit till 4 this afternoon. Intolerable! No consideration! None at all in this sex, when the accursed humours are in the way. Pay hour rather, will come. Oh, that it were to be the next! The captain is in a pet. Who can blame him? Even the women think a man of his consequence, and generously coming to serve us, hardly used. Would to heaven she had attempted to get off last night! The women not my enemies. Who knows but the husband's exerted authority might have met with such connivance, as might have concluded either in carrying her back to her former lodgings, or in consummation at Mrs. Moore's, in spite of exclamations, fits, and the rest of the female obsecrations. My beloved has not appeared to any body this day, except to Mrs. Moore. Is, it seems, extremely low, unfit for the interesting conversation that is to be held in the afternoon, longs to hear from her dear friend Miss Howe, yet cannot expect a letter for a day or two, has a bad opinion of all mankind. No wonder. Excellent creature as she is, with such a father, such uncles, such a brother as she has. How does she look? Better than could be expected from yesterday's fatigue, and last night's ill rest. These tender doves know not, till put to it, what they can bear, especially when engaged in love affairs, and their attention wholly engrossed. But the sex love busy scenes, still life is their aversion. A woman will create a storm, rather than be without one, so that they can preside in the whirlwind, and direct it, they are happy. But my beloved's misfortune is, that she must live in tumult, yet neither raise them herself, nor be able to control them. End of Letter 33.
Letter 34 of Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson. Letter 34. Mr. Lovelace to John Belford, Esquire, Saturday night, June 10th. What will be the issue of all my plots and contrivances? Devil take me, if I am able to divine. But I will not, as Lord M. would say, forestall my own market. At 4, the appointed hour, I sent up, to desire admittance in the Captain's name and my own. She would wait upon the Captain presently, not upon me, and in the parlour, if it were not engaged. The dining room being mine, perhaps that was the reason of her naming the parlour. Mighty nice again, if so. No good sign for me, thought I, this stiff punctilio. In the parlour, with me and the Captain, were Mrs. Moore, Miss Rawlins, and Mrs. Bevis. The women said they would withdraw when the lady came down. Lovelace. Not except she chooses you should, ladies. People who are so much above board as I am need not make secrets of any of their affairs. Besides, you three ladies are now acquainted with all our concerns. Captain. I have some things to say to your lady that perhaps she would not herself choose that any body should hear, not even you, Mr. Lovelace, as you and her family are not upon such a good foot of understanding as were to be wished. Well, well, Captain, I must submit. Give us a sign to withdraw, and we will withdraw. It was better that the exclusion of the women should come from him than from me. I will bow and wave my hand thus, when I wish to be alone with the lady. Her uncle dotes upon her. I hope, Mr. Lovelace, you will not make a reconciliation more difficult, for the earnestness which my dear friend shows to bring it to bear. But indeed I must tell you, as I told you more than once before, that I am afraid you have made lighter of the occasion of this misunderstanding to me than it ought to have been made. I hope, Captain Tomlinson, you do not question my veracity. I beg your pardon, Mr. Lovelace, but those things which we men may think lightly of may not be light to a woman of delicacy. And then, if you have bound yourself by a vow, you ought. Miss Rawlins, bridling, her lips closed, but her mouth stretched to a smile of approbation, the longer for not buttoning, tacitly showed herself pleased with the Captain for his delicacy. Mrs. Moore could speak. Very true, however, was all she said, with a motion of her head that expressed the bow approbatory. For my part, said the jolly widow, staring with eyes as big as eggs, I know what I know. But man and wife are man and wife, or they are not man and wife. I have no notion of standing upon such niceties. But here she comes, cried one, hearing her chamber door open. Here she comes, another, hearing it shut after her, and down dropped the angel among us. We all stood up, bowing and courtesying, and could not help it, for she entered with such an air as commanded all our reverence. Yet the Captain looked plaguy grave. Clarissa. Pray keep your seats, ladies. Pray do not go. For they made offers to withdraw. Yet Miss Rawlins would have burst had she been suffered to retire. Before this time you have all heard my story, I make no doubt. Pray keep your seats. At least, all Mr. Lovelace's. A very saucy and whimsical beginning, thought I. Captain Tomlinson, your servant, addressing herself to him with inimitable dignity. I hope you did not take amiss my declining your visit yesterday. I was really incapable of talking upon any subject that required attention. Captain. I am glad to see you better now, madam. I hope I do. Indeed I am not well. I would not have excused myself from attending you some hours ago, but in hopes I should have been better. I beg your pardon, sir, for the trouble I have given you, and shall the rather expect it, as this day will, I hope, conclude it all. Thus set, thus determined, thought I, yet to have slept upon it. But, as what you said was capable of a good as well as a bad construction, I would not put an unfavourable one upon it. Lovelace. The Captain was sorry, my dear, he did not offer his attendance the moment he arrived yesterday. He was afraid that you took it amiss that he did not. Clarissa. Perhaps I thought that my uncle's friend might have wished to see me as soon as he came. How we stared! But, sir, to me, it might be convenient to you to detain him. The devil, thought I! So there really was resentment as well as headache, as my good friend Mrs. Bevis observed, in her refusing to see the honest gentleman. Capt. You would detain me, Mr. Lovelace. I was for paying my respects to the lady the moment I came. Clarissa. Well, sir, interrupting him, to waive this, for I would not be thought captious, if you have not suffered inconvenience in being obliged to come again, I shall be easy. Capt. half disconcerted. A little inconvenience I can't say but I have suffered. I have indeed too many affairs upon my hands. But the desire I have to serve you and Mr. Lovelace, as well as to oblige my dear friend, your uncle Harlowe, make great inconveniences, but small ones. You are very obliging, sir. Here is a great alteration since you parted with us last. A great one indeed, madam. I was very much surprised at it on Thursday evening, when Mr. Lovelace conducted me to your lodgings, where we hope to find you. Have you any thing to say to me, sir, from my uncle himself, that requires my private ear? Don't go, ladies, for the women stood up and offered to withdraw. If Mr. Lovelace stays, I am sure you may. I frowned. I bit my lip. I looked at the women, and shook my head. Capt. I have nothing to offer but what Mr. Lovelace is a party to, and may hear, except one private word or two, which may be postponed to the last. Pray, ladies, keep your seats. Things are altered, sir, since I saw you. You can mention nothing that relates to me now, to which that gentleman can be a party. You surprise me, madam. I am sorry to hear this. Sorry for your uncle's sake. Sorry for your sake. Sorry for Mr. Lovelace's sake. And yet I am sure he must have given greater occasion than he has mentioned to me, or Lovelace. Indeed, Captain, indeed, ladies, I have told you great part of my story, and what I told you of my offence was the truth. What I concealed of my story was only what I apprehended would, if known, cause this dear creature to be thought more censorious than charitable. Clarissa. Well, well, sir, say what you please. Make me as black as you please. Make yourself as white as you can. I am not now in your power. That consideration will comfort me for all. Capt. God forbid that I should offer to plead in behalf of a crime, that a woman of virtue and honour cannot forgive. But surely, madam, this is going too far. Clarissa. Do not blame me, Captain Tomlinson. I have a good opinion of you as my uncle's friend. But if you are Mr. Lovelace's friend, that is another thing. For my interest and Mr. Lovelace's must now be for ever separated. Capt. One word with you, madam, if you please, offering to retire. Clarissa. You may say all that you please to say before these gentlewomen. Mr. Lovelace may have secrets. I have none. You seem to think me faulty. I should be glad that all the world knew my heart. Let my enemies sit in judgment upon my actions. Fairly scanned, I fear not the result. Let them even ask me my most secret thoughts, and, whether they make for me or against me, I will reveal them. Capt. Noble lady! Who can say as you say? The women held up their hands and eyes, each as if she had said, Not I. No disorder here, said Miss Rawlins, but, judging by her own heart, a confounded deal of improbability, I believe she thought. Finely said, to be sure, said the widow Bevis, shrugging her shoulders. Mrs. Moore sighed. Jack Belford, thought I, knows all mine, and in this I am more ingenuous than any of the three, and a fit match for this paragon. Clarissa. How Mr. Lovelace has found me out here, I cannot tell. But such mean devices, such artful, such worse than Waltham disguises put on, to obtrude himself into my company, such bold, such shocking untruths. Capt. The favour of but one word, madam, in private. Clarissa. In order to support a right which he has not over me. O sir! O Captain Tomlinson! I think I have reason to say, that the man, there he stands, is capable of any vileness. The women looked upon one another, and upon me, by turns, to see how I bore it. I had such dartings in my head at the instant, that I thought I should have gone distracted. My brain seemed on fire. What would I have given to have had her alone with me? I traversed the room, my clenched fist to my forehead. O that I had any body here, thought I, that Hercules like, when flaming in the tortures of Dejanira's poisoned shirt, I could tear in pieces. Capt. Dear lady, see you not how the poor gentleman, Lord, how have I imposed upon your uncle at this rate? How happy did I tell him I saw you? How happy I was sure you would be in each other? Clarissa. O sir, you don't know how many premeditated offences I had forgiven when I saw you last, before I could appear to you what I hoped that I might for the future be. But now you may tell my uncle, if you please, that I cannot hope for his mediation. Tell him that my guilt, in giving this man an opportunity to spirit me away from my tried, my experienced, my natural friends, harshly as they treated me, stares me every day more and more in the face, and still the more as my fate seems to be drawing to a crisis, according to the malediction of my offended father. And then she burst into tears, which even affected that dog who, brought to abet me, was himself all belforded over. The women, so used to cry without grief, as they are to laugh without reason, by mere force of example, confound their promptitudes, must needs pull out their handkerchiefs. The less wonder, however, as I myself, between confusion, surprise, and concern, could hardly stand it. What's a tender heart good for? Who can be happy that has a feeling heart? And yet, thou'lt say, that he who has it not must be a tiger, and no man. Capt. Let me beg the favour of one word with you, madam, in private, and that on my own account. The women hereupon offered to retire. She insisted that, if they went, I should not stay. Capt. Sir, bowing to me, shall I beg? I hope, thought I, that I may trust this solemn dog, instructed as he is. She does not doubt him. I'll stay out no longer than to give her time to spend her first fire. I then passively withdrew with the women, but with such a bow to my goddess, that it won for me every heart but that I wanted most to win, for the haughty maid bent not her knee in return. The conversation between the captain and the lady, when we were retired, was to the following effect. They both talked loud enough for me to hear them, the lady from anger, the captain with design, and thou mayest be sure there was no listener but myself. What I was imperfect in was supplied afterwards, for I had my vellum leave book to note all down. If she had known this, perhaps she would have been more sparing of her invectives, and but perhaps neither. He told her that as her brother was absolutely resolved to see her, and as he himself, in compliance with her uncle's expedient, had reported her marriage, and as that report had reached the ears of Lord M., Lady Betty, and the rest of my relations, and as he had been obliged, in consequence of his first report, to vouch it, and as her brother might find out where she was, and apply to the women here for a confirmation or refutation of the marriage, he had thought himself obliged to countenance the report before the women. That this had embarrassed him not a little, as he would not for the world that she should have cause to think him capable of prevarication, contrivance, or double dealing, and that this made him desirous of a private conversation with her. It was true, she said, she had given her consent to such an expedient, believing it was her uncle's, and little thinking that it would lead to so many errors. Yet she might have known that one error is frequently the parent of many. Mr. Lovelace had made her sensible of the truth of that observation on more occasions than one, and it was an observation that he, the captain, had made in one of the letters that was shown her yesterday. He hoped that she had no mistrust of him, that she had no doubt of his honour. If, madam, you suspect me, if you think me capable, what a man, the Lord be merciful to me, what a man must you think me? I hope, sir, there cannot be a man in the world who could deserve to be suspected in such a case as this. I do not suspect you. If it were possible there could be one such man, I am sure Captain Tomlinson, a father of children, a man in years, of sense and experience, cannot be that man. He told me that just then he thought he felt a sudden flash from her eye, an eye-beam, as he called it, dart through his shivering reins, and he could not help trembling. The dog's conscience, Jack, nothing else. I have felt half a dozen such flashes, such eye-beams, in as many different conversations with this soul-piercing beauty. Her uncle, she must own, was not accustomed to think of such expedients, but she had reconciled this to herself, as the case was unhappily uncommon, and by the regard he had for her honour. This set the puppy's heart at ease, and gave him more courage. She asked him if he thought Lady Betty and Miss Montague intended her a visit. He had no doubt but they did. And does he imagine, said she, that I could be brought to countenance to them the report you have given out? I had hoped to bring her to this, Jack, or she had seen their letters. But I had told the captain that I believed I must give up this expectation. No, he believed that I had not such a thought. He was pretty sure that I intended, when I saw them, to tell them, as in confidence, the naked truth. He then told her that her uncle had already made some steps towards a general reconciliation. The moment, madam, that he knows you are really married, he will enter into confidence with your father upon it, having actually expressed to your mother his desire to be reconciled to you. And what, sir, said my mother? What said my dear mother? With great emotion she asked this question, holding out her sweet face, as the captain described her, with the most earnest attention, as if she would shorten the way which his words were to have to her heart. Your mother, madam, burst into tears upon it, and your uncle was so penetrated by her tenderness, that he could not proceed with the subject. But he intends to enter upon it with her in form, as soon as he hears that the ceremony is over. By the tone of her voice she wept. The dear creature, thought I, begins to relent, and I grudged the dog his eloquence. I could hardly bear the thought that any man breathing should have the power which I had lost, of persuading this high-souled woman, though in my own favour. And wouldst thou think it, this reflection gave me more uneasiness at the moment than I felt from her reproaches, violent as they were, or than I had pleasure in her supposed relenting. For there is beauty in every thing she says and does, beauty in her passion, beauty in her tears. Had the captain been a young fellow, and of rank and fortune, his throat would have been in danger, and I should have thought very hardly of her. O Captain Tomlinson, said she, you know not what I have suffered by this man's strange ways. He had, as I was not ashamed to tell him yesterday, a plain path before him. He had first betrayed me into his power, but when I was in it. There she stopped. Then resuming, O Sir, you know not what a strange man he has been, an unpolite, a rough-mannered man, in disgrace of his birth, and education, and knowledge, an unpolite man, and so acting as if his worldly and personal advantages set him above those graces which distinguish a gentleman. The first woman that ever said, or that ever thought so of me, that's my comfort, thought I. But this, spoken of to her uncle's friend behind my back, helps to heap up thy already too full measure, dearest. It is down in my vellum book. Clarissa. When I look back on his whole behaviour to a poor young creature, for I am but a very young creature, I cannot acquit him either of great folly or of deep design. And last Wednesday. There she stopped, and I suppose turned away her face. I wonder she was not ashamed to hint at what she thought so shameful, and that to a man, and alone with him. Captain. Far be it from me, madam, to offer to enter too closely into so tender a subject. Mr. Lovelace owns that you have reason to be displeased with him. But he so solemnly clears himself of premeditated offence. Clarissa. He cannot clear himself, Captain Tomlinson. The people of the house must be very vile, as well as he. I am convinced that there was a wicked confederacy. But no more upon such a subject. Captain. Only one word more, madam. He tells me that you promised to pardon him. He tells me. He knew, interrupted she, that he deserved not pardon, or he had not extorted the promise from me, nor had I given it to him but to shield myself from the vilest outrage. Captain. I could wish, madam, inexcusable as his behaviour has been, since he has something to plead in the reliance he made upon your promise, that, for the sake of appearances to the world, and to avoid the mischiefs that may follow if you absolutely break with him, you could prevail upon your naturally generous mind to lay an obligation upon him by your forgiveness. She was silent. Captain. Your father and mother, madam, deplore a daughter lost to them, whom your generosity to Mr. Lovelace may restore. Do not put it to the possible chance, that they may have cause to deplore a double loss, the losing of a son as well as a daughter, who by his own violence, which you may perhaps prevent, may be for ever lost to them, and to the whole family. She paused. She wept. She owned that she felt the force of this argument. I will be the making of this fellow, thought I. Captain. Permit me, madam, to tell you, that I do not think it would be difficult to prevail upon your uncle, if you insist upon it, to come up privately to town, and to give you with his own hand to Mr. Lovelace, except indeed your present misunderstanding were to come to his ears. Besides, madam, your brother, it is likely, may at this very time be in town, and he is resolved to find you out. Clarissa. Why, sir, should I be so much afraid of my brother? My brother has injured me, not I him. Will my brother offer to me what Mr. Lovelace has offered? Wicked, ungrateful man! To insult a friendless, unprotected creature, made friendless by himself! I cannot think of him in the light I once thought of him. What, sir, to put myself into the power of a wretch, who has acted by me with so much vile premeditation? Who shall pity, who shall excuse me if I do, were I to suffer ever so much from him? No, sir. Let Mr. Lovelace leave me. Let my brother find me. I am not such a poor creature as to be afraid to face the brother who has injured me. Captain. Were you and your brother to meet only to confer together, to expostulate, to clear up difficulties, it were another thing. But what, madam, can you think will be the issue of an interview, Mr. Solmes with him, when he finds you unmarried, and resolved never to have Mr. Lovelace, supposing Mr. Lovelace were not to interfere, which cannot be imagined? Clarissa. Well, sir, I can only say, I am a very unhappy creature. I must resign to the will of Providence, and be patient under evils, which that will not permit me to shun. But I have taken my measures. Mr. Lovelace can never make me happy, nor I him. I wait here only for a letter from Miss Howe. That must determine me. Determine you as to Mr. Lovelace, madam? Interrupted the Captain. Clarissa. I am already determined as to him. Captain. If it be not in his favour, I have done. I cannot use stronger arguments than I have used, and it would be impertinent to repeat them. If you cannot forgive his offence, I am sure it must have been much greater than he has owned to me. If you are absolutely determined, be pleased to let me know what I shall say to your uncle. You are pleased to tell me, that this day would put an end to what you call my trouble. I should not have thought it any, could I have been an humble mean of reconciling persons of worth and honour to each other. Here I entered with a solemn air. Lovelace. Captain Tomlinson, I have heard a part of what has passed between you and this unforgiving, however otherwise excellent, lady. I am cut to the heart to find the dear creature so determined, I could not have believed it possible, with such prospects, that I had so little share in her esteem.
Nevertheless, I must do myself justice with regard to the offence I was so unhappy as to give, since I find you are ready to think it much greater than it really was. Clarissa. I hear not, Sir, your recapitulations. I am, and ought to be, the sole judge of insults offered to my person. I enter not into discussion with you, nor hear you on the shocking subject. And was going. I put myself between her and the door. You may hear all I have to say, madam. My fault is not of such a nature, but that you may. I will be a just accuser of myself, and will not wound your ears. I then protested that the fire was a real fire. So it was. I disclaimed, less truly, premeditation. I owned that I was hurried on by the violence of a youthful passion, and by a sudden impulse, which few other persons in the like situation would have been able to check. That I withdrew at her command and entreaty, on the promise of pardon, without having offered the least indecency, or any freedom, that would not have been forgiven by persons of delicacy, surprised in an attitude so charming, her terror on the alarm of fire, calling for a soothing behaviour and personal tenderness, she being ready to fall into fits, my hope for happy days so near, that I might be presumed to be looked upon as a betrothed lover, and that this excuse might be pleaded even for the women of the house, that they, thinking us actually married, might suppose themselves to be the less concerned to interfere on so tender an occasion. There, Jack, was a bold insinuation on behalf of the women. High indignation filled her disdainful eye beam after eye beam flashing at me. Every feature of her sweet face had soul in it. Yet she spoke not. Perhaps, Jack, she had a thought, that this plea for the women accounted for my contrivance to have her pass to them as married, when I first carried her thither. Capt. Indeed, Sir, I must say that you did not well to add to the apprehensions of a lady so much terrified before. The dear creature offered to go by me. I set my back against the door, and besought her to stay for a few moments. I had not said thus much, my dearest creature, but for your sake, as well as for my own, that Captain Tomlinson should not think I had been viler than I was. Nor will I say one word more on the subject, after I have appealed to your own heart, whether it was not necessary that I should say so much, and to the Captain, whether otherwise he would not have gone away with a much worse opinion of me, if he had judged of my offence by the violence of your resentment. Capt. Indeed I should. I own I should. And I am very glad, Mr. Lovelace, that you are able to defend yourself thus far. Clarissa. That cause must be well tried, where the offender takes his seat upon the same bench with the judge. I submit not mine to men, nor, give me leave to say, to you, Captain Tomlinson, though I am willing to have a good opinion of you. Had not the man been assured that he had influenced you in his favour, he would not have brought you up to Hampstead. Capt. That I am influenced, as you call it, madam, is for the sake of your uncle, and for your own sake, more, I will say to Mr. Lovelace's face, than for his. What can I have in view but peace and reconciliation? I have from the first blamed, and I now again blame Mr. Lovelace, for adding distress to distress and terror to terror. The lady, as you acknowledge, Sir, looking valiantly, ready before to fall into fits. Lovelace. Let me own to you, Captain Tomlinson, that I have been a very faulty, a very foolish man. And if this dear creature ever honoured me with her love, an ungrateful one. But I have had too much reason to doubt it. And this is now a flagrant proof that she never had the value for me which my proud heart wished for, that, with such prospects before us, a day so near, settlements approved and drawn, her uncle meditating a general reconciliation which, for her sake, not my own, I was desirous to give into, she can, for an offence so really slight, on an occasion so truly accidental, renounce me for ever, and with me all hopes of that reconciliation in the way her uncle had put it in, and she had acquiesced with, and risk all consequences, fatal ones as they may too possibly be. By my soul, Captain Tomlinson, the dear creature must have hated me all the time she was intending to honour me with her hand. And now she must resolve to abandon me, as far as I know, with a preference in her heart of the most odious of men, in favour of that Solmes who, as you tell me, accompanies her brother, and with what hopes, with what view, accompanies him. How can I bear to think of this? Clarissa. It is fit, Sir, that you should judge of my regard for you, by your own consciousness of demerit. Yet you know, or you would not have dared to behave to me as sometimes you did, that you had more of it than you deserved. She walked from us, and then returning, Captain Tomlinson, said she, I will own to you, that I was not capable of resolving to give my hand, and nothing but my hand, had I not given a flagrant proof of this to the once most indulgent of parents, which has brought me into a distress, which this man has heightened, when he ought, in gratitude and honour, to have endeavoured to render it supportable. I had even a bias, Sir, in his favour. I scruple not to own it. Long, much too long, bore I with his unaccountable ways, attributing his errors to unmeaning gaiety, and to a want of knowing what true delicacy and true generosity required from a heart susceptible of grateful impressions to one involved by his means in unhappy circumstances. It is now wickedness in him, a wickedness which discredits all his professions, to say, that this last cruel and ungrateful insult was not a premeditated one. But what need I say more of this insult, when it was of such a nature, and that it has changed that bias in his favour, and make me choose to forego all the inviting prospects he talks of, and to run all hazards, to free myself from his power? O my dearest creature, how happy for us both, had I been able to discover that bias, as you condescend to call it, through such reserves as man never encountered with! He did discover it, Captain Tomlinson. He brought me more than once to own it, the more needlessly brought me to own it, as I dare say his own vanity gave him no cause to doubt it, and as I had apparently no other motive in not being forward to own it than my too justly founded apprehensions of his want of generosity. In a word, Captain Tomlinson, and now that I am determined upon my measures, I the less scruple to say, I should have despised myself, had I found myself capable of affectation or tyranny to the man I intended to marry. I have always blamed the dearest friend I have in the world for a fault of this nature. In a word, Lovelace. And had my angel really and indeed the favour for me she is pleased to own? Dearest creature, forgive me. Restore me to your good opinion. Surely I have not sinned beyond forgiveness. You say that I extorted from you the promise you made me. But I could not have presumed to make that promise the condition of my obedience, had I not thought there was room to expect forgiveness. Permit, I beseech you, the prospects to take place that were opening so agreeably before us. I will go to town and bring the license. All difficulties to the obtaining of it are surmounted. Captain Tomlinson shall be witness to the deeds. He will be present at the ceremony on the part of your uncle. Indeed, he gave me hope that your uncle himself. Captain. I did, Mr. Lovelace. And I will tell you my grounds for the hope I gave. I promised to my dear friend, your uncle, madam, that he should give out that he would take a turn with me to my little farmhouse, as I call it, near Northampton, for a week or so. Poor gentleman, he has of late been very little abroad, too visibly declining. Change of air, it might be given out, was good for him. But I see, madam, that this is too tender a subject. The dear creature wept. She knew how to apply as meant the Captain's hint to the occasion of her uncle's declining state of health. Captain. We might indeed, I told him, set out in that road, but turn short to town in my chariot, and he might see the ceremony performed with his own eyes, and be the desired father, as well as the beloved uncle. She turned from us, and wiped her eyes. Captain. And really there seem now to be but two objections to this, as Mr. Harlowe discouraged not the proposal. The one, the unhappy misunderstanding between you, which I would not by any means he should know, since then he might be apt to give weight to Mr. James Harlowe's unjust surmises. The other, that it would necessarily occasion some delay to the ceremony, which certainly may be performed in a day or two, if... And then he reverently bowed to my goddess. Charming fellow! But often did I curse my stars for making me so much obliged to his adroitness. She was going to speak, but not liking the turn of her countenance, although, as I thought, its severity and indignation seemed a little abated, I said, and had like to have blown myself up by it, one expedient I have just thought of. Clarissa. None of your expedients, Mr. Lovelace. I abhor your expedients, your inventions. I have had too many of them. Lovelace. See, Captain Tomlinson! See, Sir! Oh, how we expose ourselves to you! Little did you think, I dare say, that we have lived in such a continued misunderstanding together. But you will make the best of it all. We may yet be happy. Oh, that I could have been assured that this dear creature loved me with 100th part of the love I have for her! Our differences have been mutual. I presume to say that she has too much punctilio. I am afraid that I have too little. Hence our difficulties. But I have a heart, Captain Tomlinson, a heart that bids me hope for her love, because it is resolved to deserve it, as much as man can deserve it. Captain. I am indeed surprised at what I have seen and heard. I defend not Mr. Lovelace, madam, in the offence he has given you. As a father of daughters myself, I cannot defend him, though his fault seems to be lighter than I had apprehended. But in my conscience, madam, I think you carry your resentment too high. Clarissa. Too high, Sir! Too high to the man that might have been happy if he would! Too high to the man that has held my soul in suspense 100 times, since, by artifice and deceit, he obtained a power over me! Say, Lovelace, thyself say, art thou not the very Lovelace, who by insulting me hast wronged thine own hopes? The wretch that appeared in vile disguises, personating an old lame creature, seeking for lodgings for thy sick wife, telling the gentlewomen here stories all of thine own invention, and asserting to them an husband's right over me, which thou hast not! And is it, turning to the Captain, to be expected, that I should give credit to the protestations of such a man? Lovelace. Treat me, my dearest creature, as you please, I will bear it. And yet your scorn and your violence have fixed daggers in my heart. But was it possible, without those disguises, to come at your speech? And could I lose you, if study, if invention, would put it in my power to arrest your anger, and give me hope to engage you to confirm to me the promised pardon? The address I made to you before the women,
as if the marriage ceremony had passed, was in consequence of what your uncle had advised, and what you had acquiesced with; and the rather made as your brother, and Singleton, and Solmes, were resolved to find out whether what was reported of your marriage were true or not, that they might take their measures accordingly, and in hopes to prevent that mischief, which I have been but too studious to prevent, since his tameness has but invited insolence from your brother and his confederates. Clarissa. O thou strange wretch, how thou talkest! But, Captain Tomlinson, give me leave to say, that, were I inclined to enter further upon this subject, I would appeal to Miss Rawlins's judgment. Whom else have I to appeal to? She seems to be a person of prudence and honour, but not to any man's judgment, whether I carry my resentment beyond fit bounds, when I resolve. Captain. Forgive, Madam, the interruption, but I think there can be no reason for this. You ought, as you said, to be the sole judge of indignities offered you. The gentlewomen here are strangers to you. You will perhaps stay but a little while among them. If you lay the state of your case before any of them, and your brother come to inquire of them, your uncle's intended mediation will be discovered, and rendered abortive. I shall appear in a light that I never appeared in my life; for these women may not think themselves obliged to keep this secret. Charming fellow! Clarissa. O what difficulties has one fatal step involved me in! But there is no necessity for such an appeal to any body. I am resolved on my measures. Captain. Absolutely resolved, Madam? Clarissa. I am. Captain. What shall I say to your uncle Harlowe, Madam? Poor gentleman! How will he be surprised! You see, Mr. Lovelace, you see, Sir, turning to me with a flourishing hand, but you may thank yourself. And admirably stalked he from us. True, by my soul, thought I. I traversed the room, and bit my unpersuasive lips, now upper, now under, for vexation. He made a profound reverence to her, and went to the window, where lay his hat and whip, and taking them up, opened the door. Child, said he, to somebody he saw, pray order my servant to bring my horse to the door. Lovelace. You won't go, Sir. I hope you won't. I am the unhappiest man in the world. You won't go yet, alas! But you won't go, Sir. There may be yet hopes that Lady Betty may have some weight. Captain. Dear Mr. Lovelace, I may not, my worthy friend and affectionate uncle, hope for some influence upon his daughter niece. But I beg pardon. A letter will always find me disposed to serve the lady, and that as well for her sake as for the sake of my dear friend. She had thrown herself into her chair, her eyes cast down. She was motionless, as in a profound study. The Captain bowed to her again, but met with no return to his bow. Mr. Lovelace, said he, with an air of equality and independence, I am yours. Still the dear unaccountable sat as immovable as a statue, stirring neither hand, foot, head, nor eye. I never before saw any one in so profound a reverie, in so waking a dream. He passed by her, to go out at the door she sat near, though the passage by the other door was his direct way, and bowed again. She moved not. I will not disturb the lady in her meditation, Sir. Adieu, Mr. Lovelace. No further, I beseech you. She started, sighing. Are you going, Sir? Captain. I am, Madam. I could have been glad to do you service, but I see it is not in my power. She stood up, holding out one hand, with inimitable dignity and sweetness. I am sorry you are going, Sir. Can't help it. I have no friend to advise with. Mr. Lovelace has the art, or good fortune, perhaps I should call it, to make himself many. Well, Sir, if you will go, I can't help it. Captain. I will not go, Madam, his eyes twinkling, again seized with a fit of humanity. I will not go, if my longer stay can do you either service or pleasure. What, Sir, turning to me, what, Mr. Lovelace, was your expedient? Perhaps something may be offered, Madam. She sighed, and was silent. Revenge, invoked I to myself, keep thy throne in my heart. If the usurper Love once more drive thee from it, thou wilt never again regain possession. Lovelace. What I had thought of, what I had intended to propose, and I sighed, was this: that the dear creature, if she will not forgive me, as she promised, will suspend the displeasure she has conceived against me, till Lady Betty arrives. That lady may be the mediatrix between us. This dear creature may put herself into her protection, and accompany her down to her seat in Oxfordshire. It is one of her ladyship's purposes to prevail on her supposed new niece to go down with her. It may pass to every one, but to Lady Betty, and to you, Captain Tomlinson, and to your friend Mr. Harlowe, as he desires, that we have been some time married, and her being with my relations will amount to a proof to James Harlowe that we are, and our nuptials may be privately, and at this beloved creature's pleasure, solemnized, and your report, Captain, authenticated. Captain. Upon my honour, Madam, clapping his hand upon his breast, a charming expedient. This will answer every end. She mused. She was greatly perplexed. At last, God direct me, said she, I know not what to do. A young unfriended creature. Whom can I have to advise with? Let me retire, if I can retire. She withdrew, with slow and trembling feet, and went up to her chamber.
For heaven's sake, said the penetrated varlet, his hands lifted up, for heaven's sake, take compassion upon this admirable woman. I cannot proceed. She deserves all things. Softly, damn the fellow, the women are coming in. He sobbed up his grief, turned about, hemmed up a more manly accent. Wipe thy cursed eyes. He did. The sunshine took place on one cheek, and spread slowly to the other, and the fellow had his whole face again. The women all three came in, led by that ever-curious Miss Rawlins. I told them that the lady was gone up to consider of every thing, that we had hopes of her, and such a representation we made of all that had passed, as brought either tacit or declared blame upon the fair perverse, for hardness of heart and over-delicacy. The widow Bevis in particular put out one lip, tossed up her head, wrinkled her forehead, and made such motions with her now lifted up, now cast down eyes, as showed that she thought there was a great deal of perverseness and affectation in the lady. Now and then she changed her censuring looks to looks of pity of me, but, as she said, she loved not to aggravate. A poor business, God helps, shrugging up her shoulders, to make such a rout about. And then her eyes laughed heartily. Indulgence was a good thing, love was a good thing, but too much was too much. Miss Rawlins, however, declared, after she had called the widow Bevis, with a prudish simper, a comical gentlewoman, that there must be something in our story which she could not fathom, and went from us into a corner, and sat down, seemingly vexed that she could not. End of Letter 34.
Letter 35 of Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson. Letter 35. Mr. Lovelace, in continuation. The lady stayed longer above than we wished, and I hoping that, ladylike, she only waited for an invitation to return to us, desired the widow Bevis in the captain's name, who wanted to go to town, to request the favour of her company. I cared not to send up either Miss Rawlins or Mrs. Moore on the errand, lest my beloved should be in a communicative disposition, especially as she had hinted at an appeal to Miss Rawlins, who, besides, has such an unbounded curiosity. Mrs. Bevis presently returned with an answer, winking and pinking at me, that the lady would follow her down. Miss Rawlins could not but offer to retire, as the others did. Her eyes, however, intimated that she had rather stay. But they not being answered as she seemed to wish, she went with the rest, but with slower feet, and had hardly left the parlour when the lady entered it by the other door, a melancholy dignity in her person and air. She sat down. Pray, Mr. Tomlinson, be seated. He took his chair over against her. I stood behind hers, that I might give him agreed-upon signals, should there be occasion for them. As thus, a wink of the left eye was to signify, push that point, Captain. A wink of the right, and a nod, was to indicate approbation of what he had said. My forefinger held up, and biting my lip, get off of that, as fast as possible. A right forward nod, and a frown. Swear to it, Captain. My whole spread hand, to take care not to say too much on that particular subject. A scowling brow, and a positive nod, was to bid him rise in temper. And these motions I could make, even those with my hand, without holding up my arm, or moving my wrist, had the women been there, as, when the motions were agreed upon, I knew not what they would. She hemmed. I was going to speak, to spare her supposed confusion, but this lady never wants presence of mind, when presence of mind is necessary either to her honour, or to that conscious dignity, which distinguishes her from all the women I ever knew. I have been considering, said she, as well as I was able, of every thing that has passed, and of all that has been said, and of my unhappy situation. I mean no ill, I wish no ill, to any creature living, Mr. Tomlinson. I have always delighted to draw favourable rather than unfavourable conclusions, sometimes, as it has proved, for very bad hearts. Censoriousness, whatever faults I have, is not naturally my fault, but, circumstanced as I am, treated as I have been, unworthily treated, by a man who is full of contrivances, and glories in them. Lovelace. My dearest life! But I will not interrupt you. Clarissa. Thus treated, it becomes me to doubt. It concerns my honour to doubt, to fear, to apprehend. Your intervention, sir, is so seasonable, so kind, for this man. My uncle's expedient, the first of the kind he ever, I believe, thought of. A plain, honest, good-minded man, as he is, not affecting such expedients. Your report in conformity to it. The consequences of that report. The alarm taken by my brother, his rash resolution upon it. The alarm taken by Lady Betty, and the rest of Mr. Lovelace's relations. The sudden letters written to him upon it, which, with yours, he showed me. all ceremony among persons born observers of ceremony, and entitled to value themselves upon their distinction, dispensed with. All these things have happened so quick, and some of them so seasonable. Lovelace. Lady Betty, you see, Madam, in her letter, dispenses with punctilia, avowedly in compliment to you. Charlotte, in hers, professes to do the same for the same reason. Good Heaven! That the respect intended you by my relations, who in every other case are really punctilious, should be thus construed! They were glad, Madam, to have an opportunity to compliment you at my expense. Every one of my family takes delight in rallying me, but their joy on the supposed occasion. Clarissa. Do I doubt, Sir, that you have not something to say for any thing you think fit to do? I am speaking to Captain Tomlinson, Sir. I will you would be pleased to withdraw, at least to come from behind my chair. And she looked at the Captain, observing, no doubt, that his eyes seemed to take lessons from mine. A fair match, by Jupiter. The Captain was disconcerted. The dog had not had such a blush upon his face for 10 years before. I bit my lip for vexation, walked about the room, but nevertheless took my post again, and blinked with my eyes to the Captain as a caution for him to take more care of his, and then, scowling with my brows, and giving the nod positive, I as good as said, Resent that, Captain. Captain. I hope, Madam, you have no suspicion that I am capable. Clarissa. Be not displeased with me, Captain Tomlinson. I have told you that I am not of a suspicious temper. Excuse me for the sake of my sincerity. There is not, I will be bold to say, a sincerer heart in the world than hers before you. She took out her handkerchief, and put it to her eyes. I was going at that instant, after her example, to vouch for the honesty of my heart, but my conscience meddled upon me, and would not suffer the meditated vow to pass my lips. A devilish thing, thought I, for a man to be so little himself, when he has most occasion for himself. The villain Tomlinson looked at me with a rueful face, as if he begged leave to cry for company. It might have been as well if he had cried. A feeling heart, or the tokens of it given by a sensible eye, are very reputable things, when kept in countenance by the occasion. And here let me fairly own to thee, that 20 times in this trying conversation I said to myself, that could I have thought that I should have had all this trouble, and incurred all this guilt, I would have been honest at first. But why, Jack, is this dear creature so lovely, yet so invincible? Ever heardst thou before that the sweets of May blossomed in December? Captain. Be pleased, Madam, if you have any doubts of my honour. A whining varlet! He should have been quite angry. For what gave I him the nod positive? He should have stalked again to the window, as for his whip and hat. Clarissa. I am only making such observations as my youth, my inexperience, and my present unhappy circumstances suggest to me. A worthy heart, such I hope as Captain Tomlinson's, need not fear an examination, need not fear being looked into. Whatever doubts that man who has been the cause of my errors, and, as my severe father imprecated, the punisher of the errors he has caused, might have had of me, or of my honour, I would have forgiven him for them, if he had fairly proposed them to me, for some doubts perhaps such a man might have of the future conduct of a creature, whom he could induce to correspond with him against parental prohibition, and against the lights which her own judgment threw in upon her. And if he had propounded them to me like a man and a gentleman, I would have been glad of the opportunity given me to clear my intentions, and to have shown myself entitled to his good opinion. And I hope you, Sir. Captain. I am ready to hear all your doubts, Madam, and to clear them up. Clarissa. I will only put it, Sir, to your conscience and honour. The dog sat uneasy. He shuffled with his feet. Her eye was upon him. He was, therefore, after the rebuff he had met with, afraid to look at me for my motions, and now turned his eyes towards me, then from me, as if he would unlook his own looks. Clarissa. That all is true that you have written, and that you have told me. I gave him a right forward nod, and a frown, as much as to say, Swear to it, Captain. But the varlet did not round it off as I would have had him. However, he averred that it was. He had hoped, he said, that the circumstances with which his commission was attended, and what he had communicated to her, which he could not know but from his dear friend her uncle, might have shielded him even from the shadow of suspicion. But I am contented, said he, stammering, to be thought, what you please to think of me, till you are satisfied. A whore's bird. Clarissa. The circumstances you refer to, I must own, ought to shield you, Sir, from suspicion. But the man before you is a man that would make an angel suspected, should that angel plead for him. I came forward, traversed the room, was indeed in a bloody passion. I have no patience, Madam. And again I bit my unpersuasive lips. Clarissa. No man ought to be impatient at imputations he is not ashamed to deserve. An innocent man will not be outrageous upon such imputations. A guilty man ought not. most excellently with this charming creature cap sentences with Lord M. But I am not now trying you, sir, to me, on the foot of your merits. I am only sorry that I am constrained to put questions to this worthier gentleman. Worthier gentleman, Jack! Which perhaps I ought not to put, so far as they regard himself. And I hope, Captain Tomlinson, that you, who know not Mr. Lovelace so well, as, to my unhappiness, I do, and who have children of your own, will excuse a poor young creature who is deprived of all worldly protection, and who has been insulted and endangered by the most designing man in the world, and perhaps by a confederacy of his creatures. There she stopped and stood up and looked at me. Fear, nevertheless, apparently mingled with her anger. And so it ought. I was glad, however, of this poor sign of love. No one fears whom they value not. Women's tongues were licensed, I was going to say, but my conscience would not let me call her a woman, nor use to her so vulgar a phrase. I could only rave by my motions, lift up my eyes, spread my hands, rub my face, pull my wig, and look like a fool. Indeed, I had a great mind to run mad. Had I been alone with her, I would, and she should have taken consequences. The captain interposed in my behalf, gently, however, and as a man not quite sure that he was himself acquitted. Some of the pleas we had both insisted on he again enforced, and speaking low, Poor gentleman, said he, who can but pity him? Indeed, madam, it is easy to see, with all his failings, the power you have over him. Clarissa. I have no pleasure, sir, in distressing any one, not even him who has so much distressed me. But, sir, when I think, and when I see him before me, I cannot command my temper. Indeed, Captain Tomlinson, Mr. Lovelace has not acted by me either as a grateful or generous man, nor even as a prudent one. He knows not, as I told him yesterday, the value of the heart he has insulted. There the angel stopped, her handkerchief at her eyes. O Belford, Belford, that she should so greatly excel as to make me at times appear as a villain in my own eyes! I besought her pardon. I promised that it should be the study of my whole life to deserve it. My faults, I said, whatever they had been, were rather faults in her apprehension than in fact. I besought her to give way to the expedient I had hit upon. I repeated it. The captain enforced it, for her uncle's sake. I, once more, for the sake of the general reconciliation, for the sake of all my family, for the sake of preventing further mischief. She wept. She seemed staggered in her resolution. She turned from me. I mentioned the letter of Lord M. I besought her to resign to Lady Betty's mediation all our differences, if she would not forgive me before she saw her. She turned towards me. She was going to speak, but her heart was full, and again she turned away her eyes. And do you really and indeed expect Lady Betty and Miss Montague? And do you... Again she stopped. I answered in a solemn manner. She turned from me her whole face, and paused, and seemed to consider. But, in a passionate accent, again turning towards me, Oh, how difficult, Jack, for a Harlowe spirit to forgive! Let her ladyship come, if she pleases, said she. I cannot wish to see her. And if I did see her, and she were to plead for you, I cannot wish to hear her. The more I think, the less I can forgive an attempt that I am convinced was intended to destroy me. A plaguy strong word for the occasion, supposing she was right. What has my conduct been, that an insult of such a nature should be offered to me, and it would be a weakness in me to forgive? I am sunk in my own eyes, and how can I receive a visit that must depress me more? The captain urged her in my favour with greater earnestness than before. We both even clamoured, as I may say, for mercy and forgiveness. Didst thou never hear the good folks talk of taking heaven by storm? Contrition repeatedly avowed, a total reformation promised, the happy expedient again urged. Clarissa. I have taken my measures. I have gone too far to recede, or to wish to recede. My mind is prepared for adversity. That I have not deserved the evils I have met with is my consolation. I have written to Miss Howe what my intentions are. My heart is not with you. It is against you, Mr. Lovelace. I had not written to you as I did in the letter I left behind me, had I not resolved, whatever became of me, to renounce you for ever. I was full of hope now. Severe as her expressions were, I saw she was afraid that I should think of what she had written. And indeed her letter is violence itself. Angry people, Jack, should never write while their passion holds. Lovelace. The severity you have shown me, madam, whether by pen or by speech, shall never have place in my remembrance but for your honour. In the light you have taken things, all is deserved, and but the natural result of virtuous resentment. And I adore you, even for the pangs you have given me. She was silent. She had employment enough with her handkerchief at her eyes. Lovelace. You lament sometimes that you have no friends of your own sex to consult with. Miss Rawlins, I must confess, is too inquisitive to be confided in. I like not, thou mayest think, her appeal to Miss Rawlins. She may mean well,
But I never in my life knew a person who was fond of prying into the secrets of others that was fit to be trusted. The curiosity of such is governed by pride, which is not gratified but by whispering about a secret till it becomes public, in order to show either their consequence or their sagacity. It is so in every case. What man or woman who is covetous of power or of making a right use of it? But in the ladies of my family you may confide. It is their ambition to think of you as one of themselves. Renew but your consent to pass to the world, for the sake of your uncle's expedient, and for the prevention of mischief, as a lady sometime married. Lady Betty may be acquainted with the naked truth, and you may, as she hopes you will, accompany her to her seat; and if it must be so, consider me as in a state of penitence or probation, to be accepted or rejected, as I may appear to deserve. The Captain again clapped his hands on his breast, and declared, upon his honour, that this was a proposal that, were the case that of his own daughter, and she were not resolved upon immediate marriage, which yet he thought by far the more eligible choice, he should be very much concerned were she to refuse it. Clarissa. Were I with Mr. Lovelace's relations, and to pass as his wife to the world, I could not have any choice. And how could he be then in a state of probation? O Mr. Tomlinson, you are too much his friend to see into his drift. Captain. His friend, madam, as I said before, as I am yours and your uncle's, for the sake of a general reconciliation, which must begin with a better understanding between yourselves. Lovelace. Only, my dearest life, resolve to attend the arrival and visit of Lady Betty, and permit her to arbitrate between us. Captain. There can be no harm in that, madam. You can suffer no inconvenience from that. If Mr. Lovelace's offence be such, that a woman of Lady Betty's character judges it to be unpardonable, why then Clarissa. Interrupting, and to me. If I am not invaded by you, sir, if I am, as I ought to be, my own mistress, I think to stay here in this honest house, and then had I an eye-beam, as the Captain calls it, flashed at me, till I receive a letter from Miss Howe, that I hope will be in a day or two. If in that time the ladies come whom you expect, and if they are desirous to see the creature whom you have made unhappy, I shall know whether I can or cannot receive their visit. She turned short to the door, and retiring, went up stairs to her chamber. O sir, said the Captain, as soon as she was gone, what an angel of a woman is this! I have been, and I am, a very wicked man. But if any thing should happen amiss to this admirable lady through my means, I shall have more cause for self-reproach than for all the bad actions of my life put together. And his eyes glistened. Nothing can happen amiss, thou sorrowful dog. What can happen amiss? Are we to form our opinion of things by the romantic notions of a girl, who supposes that to be the greatest which is the slightest of evils? Have I not told thee our whole story? Has she not broken her promise? Did I not generously spare her when in my power? I was decent, though I had had such advantage. Greater liberties have I taken with girls of character at a common romping bout, and all has been laughed off, and handkerchief and head-clothes adjusted, and petticoats shaken to rights in my presence. Never man in the like circumstances, and resolved as I was resolved, goaded on as I was goaded on, as well by her own sex as by the impulses of a violent passion, was ever so decent. Yet what mercy does she show me? Now, Jack, this pitiful dog was such another unfortunate one as thyself. His arguments serving to confirm me in the very purpose he brought them to prevail upon me to give up. Had he left me to myself, to the tenderness of my own nature, moved as I was when the lady withdrew, and had he sat down and made odious faces and said nothing, it is very possible that I should have taken the chair over against him, which she had quitted, and have cried and blubbered with him for half an hour together. But the varlet to argue with me! To pretend to convince a man who knows in his heart that he is doing a wrong thing! He must needs think that this would put me upon trying what I could say for myself. And when the extended compunction can be carried from the heart to the lips, it must evaporate in words. Thou, perhaps, in this place, wouldst have urged the same pleas that he urged. What I answered to him, therefore, may do for thee, and spare thee the trouble of writing, and me of reading, a good deal of nonsense. Captain. You are pleased to tell me, sir, that you only proposed to try her virtue, and that you believed you should actually marry her. Lovelace. So I shall, and cannot help it. I have no doubt but I shall. And as to trying her, is she not now in the height of her trial? Have I not reason to think that she is coming about? Is she not now yielding up her resentment for an attempt which she thinks she ought not to forgive? And if she do, may she not forgive the last attempt? Can she, in a word, resent that more than she does this? Women often, for their own sakes, will keep the last secret, but will ostentatiously din the ears of gods and men with their clamours upon a successless offer. It was my folly, my weakness, that I gave her not more cause for this her unsparing violence. Captain. O sir, you will never be able to subdue this lady without force. Lovelace.
Well then, puppy, must I not endeavour to find a proper time and place? Captain. Forgive me, sir, but can you think of force to such a fine creature? Lovelace. Force indeed I abhor the thought of. And for what, thinkest thou, have I taken all the pains I have taken, and engaged so many persons in my cause, but to avoid the necessity of violent compulsion? But yet, imaginest thou that I expect direct consent from such a lover of forms as this lady is known to be? Let me tell thee, M'Donald, that thy master, Belford, has urged on thy side of the question all that thou canst urge. Must I have every sorry fellow's conscience to pacify, as well as my own? By my soul, Patrick, she has a friend here, clapping my hand on my breast, that pleads for her with greater and more irresistible eloquence than all the men in the world can plead for her, and had she not escaped me. And yet, how have I answered my first design of trying her, and in her the virtue of the most virtuous of the sex? Perseverance, man, perseverance! What! Wouldst thou have me decline a trial that they make for the honour of a sex we all so dearly love? Then, sir, you have no thoughts, looking still more sorrowfully, of marrying this wonderful lady? Yes, yes, Patrick, but I have. But let me first, to gratify my pride, bring down hers. Let me see that she loves me well enough to forgive me for my own sake. Has she not heretofore lamented that she stayed not in her father's house, though the consequence must have been, if she had, that she would have been the wife of the odious Solmes? If now she be brought to consent to be mine, seest thou not that the reconciliation with her detested relations is the inducement, as it always was, and not love of me? Neither her virtue nor her love can be established but upon full trial, the last trial. But if her resistance and resentment be such as hitherto I have reason to expect they will be, and if I find in that resentment less of hatred of me than of the fact, then shall she be mine in her own way. Then, hateful as is the life of shackles to me, will I marry her. Well, sir, I can only say that I am dough in your hands, to be moulded into what shape you please. But if, as I said before... None of thy said befores, Patrick. I remember all thou saidst. And I know all thou canst further say. Thou art only Pontius Pilate, like washing thine own hands. Don't I know thee? That thou mayest have something to silence thy conscience with by loading me. But we have gone too far to recede. Are not all our engines in readiness? Dry up thy sorrowful eyes. Let unconcern and heart's ease once more take possession of thy solemn features. Thou hast hitherto performed extremely well. Shame not thy past by thy future behaviour, and a rich reward awaits thee. If thou art dough, be dough, and I slapped him on the shoulder. Resume but thy former shape, and I'll be answerable for the event. He bowed assent and compliance, went to the glass, and began to untwist and unsadden his features, pulled his wig right, as if that, as well as his head and heart, had been discomposed by his compunction, and once more became old Lucifer's and mine. But didst thou think, Jack, that there was so much, what shall I call it, in this Tomlinson? Didst thou imagine that such a fellow as that had bowels? That nature, so long dead and buried in him, as to all humane effects, should thus revive and exert itself? Yet why do I ask this question of thee, who, to my equal surprise, hast shown on the same occasion the like compassionate sensibilities? As to Tomlinson, it looks as if poverty had made him the wicked fellow he is, as plenty and wantonness have made us what we are. Necessity, after all, is the test of principle. But what is there in this dull word or thing called honesty, that even I, who cannot in my present views be served by it, cannot help thinking even the accidental emanations of it amiable in Tomlinson, though demonstrated in a female case, and judging better of him for being capable of such? End of Letter 35. Letter 36 of Clarissa Harlowe on the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. Clarissa Harlowe on the History of a Young Lady, Volume 5, by Samuel Richardson, Letter 36. Mr. Lovelace to John Belford, Esquire. This debate between the Captain and me was hardly over when the three women, led by Miss Rawlins, entered, hoping no intrusion, but very desirous, the maiden said, to know if we were likely to accommodate. Oh yes, I hope so. You know, ladies, that your sex must, in these cases, preserve their forms. They must be courted to comply with their own happiness, a lucky expedient we have hit upon. The uncle has his doubts of our marriage. He cannot believe, nor will anybody, that it is possible that a man so much in love, the lady so desirable. They all took the hint. It was a very extraordinary case, the two widows allowed. Women, Jack, as I believe I have observed elsewhere, have a high opinion of what they can do for us. Miss Rawlins desired, if I pleased, to let them know the expedient, and looked as if there was no need to proceed in the rest of my speech. I begged that they would not let the lady know I had told them what this expedient was, and they should hear it. They promised. It was this: that to oblige and satisfy Mr. Harlowe, the ceremony was to be again performed. He was to be privately present, and to give his niece to me with his own hands, and she was retired to consider of it. Thou seest, Jack, that I have provided an excuse to save my veracity to the women here, in case I should incline to marriage, and she should choose to have Miss Rawlins's assistance at the ceremony. Nor doubted I to bring my fair one to save my credit on this occasion, if I could get her to consent to be mine. A charming expedient, cried the widow. They were all three ready to clap their hands for joy upon it. Women love to be married twice at least, Jack, though not indeed to the same man. And all blessed the reconciliatory scheme, and the proposer of it. And supposing it came from the captain, they looked at him with pleasure, while his face shined with the applause implied. He should think himself very happy if he could bring about a general reconciliation, and he flourished with his head like my man Will on his victory over old Grimes, bridling by turns like Miss Rawlins in the height of a prudish fit. But now it was time for the captain to think of returning to town, having a great deal of business to dispatch before morning. Nor was he certain that he should be able again to attend us at Hampstead before he went home. And yet, as everything was drawing towards a crisis, I did not intend that he should leave Hampstead that night. A message to the above effect was carried up, at my desire, by Mrs. Moore, with the captain's compliments, and to know if she had any commands for him to her uncle. But I hinted to the women that it would be proper for them to withdraw if the lady did come down, lest she should not care to be so free before them on a proposal so particular as she would be to us, who had offered it to her consideration. Mrs. Moore brought down word that the lady was following her. They all three withdrew, and she entered at one door as they went out at the other. The captain accosted her, repeating the contents of the message sent up, and desired that she would give him her commands in relation to the report he was to make to her uncle Harlowe. I know not what to say, sir, nor what I would have you to say to my uncle. Perhaps you may have business in town. Perhaps you need not see my uncle till I have heard from Miss Howe, till after Lady Betty. I don't know what to say. I implored the return of that value which she had so generously acknowledged once to have had for me. I presumed, I said, to flatter myself that Lady Betty, in her own person, and in the name of all my family, would be able, on my promised reformation and contrition, to prevail in my favour, especially as our prospects in other respects, with regard to the general reconciliation wished for, were so happy. But let me owe to your own generosity, my dearest creature, said I, rather than to the mediation of any person on earth, the forgiveness I am an humble suitor for. How much more agreeable to yourself, O best beloved of my soul, must it be, as well as obliging to me, that your first personal knowledge of my relations, and theirs of you, for they will not be denied attending you, should not be begun in recriminations, in appeals. As Lady Betty will be here soon, it will not perhaps be possible for you to receive her visit with a brow absolutely serene. But, dearest, dearest creature, I beseech you, let the misunderstanding pass as a slight one, as a misunderstanding cleared up. Appeals give pride and superiority to the persons appealed to, and are apt to lessen the appellant not only in their eye, but in her own. Exalt not into judges those who are prepared to take lessons and instructions from you. The individuals of my family are as proud as I am said to be, but they will cheerfully resign to your superiority. You will be the first woman of the family in every one's eyes. This might have done with any other woman in the world but this. And yet she is the only woman in the world of whom it may with truth be said. But thus angrily did she disclaim the compliment. Yes, indeed, and there she stopped a moment, her sweet bosom heaving with a noble disdain, cheated out of myself from the very first, a fugitive from my own family, renounced by my relations, insulted by you, laying humble claim to the protection of yours. Is not this the light in which I must appear not only to the ladies of your family, but to all the world? Think you, sir, that in these circumstances, or even had I been in the happiest, that I could be affected by this plea of undeserved superiority? You are a stranger to the mind of Clarissa Harlowe, if you think her capable of so poor and so undue a pride. She went from us to the further end of the room. The captain was again affected. Excellent creature, I called her, and reverently approaching her, urged further the plea I had last made. It is but lately, said I, that the opinions of my relations have been more than indifferent to me, whether good or bad. And it is for your sake, more than for my own, that I now wish to stand well with my whole family. The principal motive of Lady Betty's coming up is to purchase presents for the whole family to make on the happy occasion. This consideration, turning to the captain, with so noble-minded a dear creature, I know, can have no weight, only as it will show their value and respect. But what a damp would their worthy hearts receive, were they to find their admired new niece, as they now think her, not only not their niece, but capable of renouncing me for ever! They love me, they all love me. I have been guilty of carelessness and levity to them indeed, but of carelessness and levity only. and that owing to a pride that has set me above meanness, though it has not done every thing for me. My whole family will be guarantees for my good behaviour to this dear creature, their niece, their daughter, their cousin, their friend, their chosen companion and directress, all in one. Upon my soul, Captain, we must be happy. But, dearest creature, let me, on my knees, and down I dropped, her face all the time turned half from me, as she stood at the window, her handkerchief often at her eyes, on my knees let me plead your promised forgiveness, and let us not appear to them on their visit thus unhappy with each other. Lady Betty, the next hour that she sees you, will write her opinion of you, and of the likelihood of our future happiness, to Lady Sarah, her sister, a weak-spirited woman, who now hopes to supply to herself in my bride the lost daughter she still mourns for. The Captain then joined in, and re-urged her uncle's hopes and expectations, and his resolution effectually to set about the general reconciliation, the mischief that might be prevented, and the certainty that there was that her uncle might be prevailed on to give her to me with his own hand, if she made it her choice to wait for his coming up. But for his own part, he humbly advised, and fervently pressed her, to make the very next day, or Monday at furthest, my happy day. Permit me, dearest lady, said he, and I could kneel to you myself, bending his knee, though I have no interest in my earnestness, but the pleasure I should have to be able to serve you all, to beseech you to give me an opportunity to assure your uncle that I myself saw with my own eyes the happy knot tied. All misunderstandings, all doubts, all differences, will then be at an end. And what, madam, rejoined I, still kneeling, can there be in your new measures, be they what they will, that can so happily, so reputably, I will presume to say, for all around, obviate the present difficulties? Miss Howe herself, if she love you, and if she love your fame, madam, urged the Captain, his knee still bent, must congratulate you on such happy conclusion. Then turning her face, she saw the Captain half kneeling. O Sir! O Captain Tomlinson! Why this undue condescension? Extending her hand to his elbow to raise him. I cannot bear this. Then casting her eye on me, Rise, Mr. Lovelace. Kneel not to the poor creature whom you have insulted. How cruel the occasion for it, and how mean the submission! Not mean to such an angel, nor can I rise but to be forgiven. The Captain then re-urged once more the day. He was amazed, he said, if she ever valued me. O Captain Tomlinson, interrupted she, how much are you the friend of this man? If I had never valued him, he never would have had it in his power to insult me. Nor could I, if I had never regarded him, have taken to heart as I do, the insult, execrable as it was, so undeservedly, so ungratefully given. But let him retire. For a moment let him retire. I was more than half afraid to trust the Captain by himself with her. He gave me a sign that I might depend upon him. And then I took out of my pocket his letter to me, and Lady Betty's and Miss Montague's, and Lord M.'s letters, which last she had not then seen, and giving them to him, procure for me, in the first place, Mr. Tomlinson, a reperusal of these 3 letters, and of this from Lord M. And I beseech you, my dearest life, give them due consideration, and let me on my return find the happy effects of that consideration. I then withdrew, with slow feet, however, and a misgiving heart. The Captain insisted upon this reperusal previously to what she had to say to him, as he tells me. She complied, but with some difficulty, as if she were afraid of being softened in my favour. She lamented her unhappy situation, destitute of friends, and not knowing whither to go or what to do. She asked questions, sifting questions, about her uncle, about her family, and after what he knew of Mr. Hickman's fruitless application in her favour. He was well prepared in this particular, for I had shown him the letters and extracts of letter of Miss Howe, which I had so happily come at. Might she be assured, she asked him, that her brother, with Singleton and Solmes, were actually in quest of her? He averred that they were. She asked if he thought I had hopes of prevailing on her to go back to town. He was sure I had not. Was he really of opinion that Lady Betty would pay her a visit? He had no doubt of it. But, Sir, but Captain Tomlinson, impatiently turning from him, and again to him, I know not what to do. But were I your daughter, Sir, were you my own father? Alas, Sir, I have neither father nor mother. He turned from her, and wiped his eyes. O Sir, you have humanity. She wept too. There are some men in the world, thank Heaven, that can be moved. O Sir, I have met with hard-hearted men, in my own family too, or I could not have been so unhappy as I am. But I make every body unhappy. His eyes no doubt ran over. Dearest Madam, Heavenly Lady, who can, hesitated and blubbered the dog, as he owned. And indeed I heard some part of what passed, though they both talked lower than I wished. For, from the nature of their conversation, there was no room for altitudes. Them, and both, and they. How it goes against me to include this angel of a creature, and any man on earth but myself, in one world. Captain. Who can forbear being affected? But, Madam, you can be no other man's. Clarissa. Nor would I be. But he is so sunk with me. To fire the house! An artifice so vile! Contrived for the worst of purposes! Would you have a daughter of yours But what would I say? Yet you see that I have nobody in whom I can confide. Mr. Lovelace is a vindictive man. He could not love the creature whom he could insult as he has insulted me. She paused; and then resuming, in short, I never, never can forgive him, nor he me. Do you think, Sir, I never would have gone so far as I have gone, if I had intended ever to draw with him in one yoke? I left behind me such a letter. You know, Madam, he has acknowledged the justice of your resentment. O Sir, he can acknowledge and he can retract 50 times a day. But do not think I am trifling with myself and you, and want to be persuaded to forgive him, and to be his. There is not a creature of my sex who would have been more explicit and more frank than I would have been, from the moment I intended to be his, had I a heart like my own to deal with. I was always above reserve, Sir, I will presume to say, where I had no cause of doubt. Mr. Lovelace's conduct has made me appear perhaps over nice, when my heart wanted to be encouraged and assured, and when, if it had been so, my whole behaviour would have been governed by it. She stopped, her handkerchief at her eyes. I inquired after the minutest part of her behaviour, as well as after her words. I love, thou knowest, to trace human nature, and more particularly female nature, through its most secret recesses. The pitiful fellow was lost in silent admiration of her. And thus the noble creature proceeded. It is the fate in unequal unions, that tolerable creatures through them frequently incur censure, when more happily yoked they might be entitled to praise. And shall I not shun a union with a man, that might lead into errors a creature who flatters herself that she is blessed with an inclination to be good, and who wishes to make every one happy with whom she has any connection, even to her very servants? She paused, taking a turn about the room. The fellow, devil fetch him, a mummy all the time, then proceeded. Formerly, indeed, I hoped to be an humble mean of reforming him. But when I have no such hope, is it right, you are a serious man, Sir, to make a venture that shall endanger my own morals? Still silent was the varlet. If my advocate had nothing to say for me, what hope of carrying my cause? And now, Sir, what is the result of all? It is this, that you will endeavour, if you have that influence over him which a man of your sense and experience ought to have, to prevail upon him, and that for his own sake, as well as for mine, to leave me free to pursue my own destiny. And of this you may assure him, that I will never be any other man's. Impossible, Madam! I know that Mr. Lovelace would not hear me with patience on such a topic. And I do assure you that I have some spirit, and should not care to take an indignity from him, or from any man living. She paused; then resuming, And think you, Sir, that my uncle will refuse to receive a letter from me? How averse, Jack, to concede a tittle in my favour! I know, Madam, as matters are circumstanced, that he would not answer it. If you please, I will carry one down from you. And will he not pursue his intentions in my favour, nor be himself reconciled to me, except I am married? From what your brother gives out, and affects to believe, on Mr. Lovelace's living with you in the same No more, Sir. I am an unhappy creature. He then re-urged, that it would be in her power instantly, or on the morrow, to put an end to all her difficulties. How can that be? Said she. The license still to be obtained? The settlement still to be signed? Miss Howe's answer to my last unreceived? And shall I, Sir, be in such a hurry, as if I thought my honour in danger if I delayed? Yet marry the man from whom only it can be endangered! Unhappy, thrice unhappy Clarissa Harlowe! In how many difficulties has one rash step involved thee! And she turned from him and wept. The varlet, by way of comfort, wept too. Yet her tears, as he might have observed, were tears that indicated rather a yielding than a perverse temper. There is a sort of stone, thou knowest, so soft in the quarry, that it may in manner be cut with a knife. But if the opportunity not be taken, and it is exposed to the air for any time, it will become as hard as marble, and then with difficulty it yields to the chisel. So this lady, not taken at the moment, after a turn or two across the room, gained more resolution. And then she declared, as she had done once before, that she would wait the issue of Miss Howe's answer to the letter she had sent her from hence, and take her measure accordingly, leaving it to him mean time to make what report he thought fit to her uncle. The kindest that truth could bear, she doubted not from Captain Tomlinson, and she should be glad of a few lines from him to hear what that was. She wished him a good journey. She complained of her head, and was about to withdraw, but I stepped round to the door next the stairs, as if I had but just come in from the garden, which, as I entered, I called a very pretty one, and took her reluctant hand as she was going out. My dearest life, you are not going? What hopes, Captain? Have you not some hopes to give me of pardon and reconciliation? She said she would not be detained. But I would not let her go till she had promised to return, when the Captain had reported to me what her resolution was. And when he had, I sent up and claimed her promise, and she came down again, and repeated, as what she was determined upon, that she would wait for Miss Howe's answers to the letter she had written to her, and take her measures according to its contents. I expostulated with her upon it in the most submissive and earnest manner. She made it necessary for me to repeat many of the pleas I had before urged. The Captain seconded me with equal earnestness. At last each fell down on our knees before her. She was distressed. I was afraid at one time she would have fainted. Yet neither of us would rise without some concessions. I pleaded my own sake, the Captain his dear friend, her uncle's, and both repleaded the prevention of future mischief, and the peace and happiness of the two families. She owned herself unequal to the conflict. She sighed, she sobbed, she wept, she wrung her hands. I was perfectly eloquent in my vows and protestations. Her tearful eyes were cast down upon me, a glow upon each charming cheek, a visible anguish in every lovely feature. At last her trembling knees seemed to fail her. She dropped into the next chair. Her charming face, as if seeking for a hiding place, which a mother's bosom would have best supplied, sinking upon her own shoulder. I forgot at the instant all my vows of revenge. I threw myself at her feet as she sat, and snatching her hand, pressed it with my lips. I besought Heaven to forgive my past offences, and prosper my future hopes, as I design honourably and justly by the charmer of my heart, if once more she should restore me to her favour. And I thought I felt drops of scalding water, could they be tears, trickle down upon my cheeks, while my cheeks, glowing like fire, seemed to scorch up the unwelcome strangers. I then arose, not doubting of an implied pardon in this silent distress. I raised the Captain. I whispered him, by my soul, man, I am in earnest. Now talk of reconciliation, of her uncle, of the license, of settlement. And raising my voice, if now at last, Captain Tomlinson, my angel will give me leave to call so great a blessing mine, it will be impossible that you should say too much to her uncle, in praise of my gratitude, my affection, and fidelity to his charming niece, and he may begin as soon as he pleases his kind schemes for effecting the desirable reconciliation, nor shall he prescribe any terms to me that I will not comply with. The Captain blessed me with his eyes and hands. Thank God, whispered he. We approached the lady together. Captain. What hinders, dearest madam? What now hinders, but that Lady Betty Lawrance, when she comes, may be acquainted with the truth of every thing, and that then she may assist privately at your nuptials? I will stay till they are celebrated, and then shall go down with the happy tidings to my dear Mr. Harlowe, and all will, all must soon be happy. I must have an answer from Miss Howe, replied the still trembling fair one. I cannot change my new measures but with her advice. I will forfeit all my hopes of happiness in this world, rather than forfeit her good opinion, and that she should think me giddy, unsteady, or precipitate. All I shall further say on the present subject is this, that when I have her answer to what I have written, I will write to her the whole state of the matter, as I shall then be enabled to do. Lovelace. Then must I despair for ever? O Captain Tomlinson, Miss Howe hates me. Miss Howe... Captain. Not so, perhaps. When Miss Howe knows your concern for having offended, she will never advise that, with such prospects of general reconciliation, the hopes of so many considerable persons in both families should be frustrated. Some little time, as this excellent lady had foreseen and hinted, will necessarily be taken up in actually procuring the license, and in perusing and signing the settlements. In that time, Miss Howe's answer may be received, and Lady Betty may arrive, and she, no doubt, will have weight to dissipate the lady's doubts, and to accelerate the day. It shall be my part, meantime, to make Mr. Harlowe easy. All I fear is from Mr. James Harlowe's quarter, and therefore all must be conducted with prudence and privacy, as your uncle, madam, has proposed. She was silent. I rejoiced in her silence. The dear creature, thought I, has actually forgiven me in her heart. But why will she not lay me under obligation to her by the generosity of an explicit declaration? And yet, as that would not accelerate any thing, while the license is not in my hands, she is the less to be blamed, if I do her justice, for taking more time to descend. I proposed, as on the morrow night, to go to town, and doubted not to bring the license up with me on Monday morning, would she be pleased to assure me that she would not depart from Mrs. Moore's. She should stay at Mrs. Moore's till she had an answer from Miss Howe. I told her that I hoped I might have her tacit consent at least to the obtaining of the license. I saw by the turn of her countenance that I should not have asked this question. She was so far from tacitly consenting that she declared to the contrary. As I never intended, I said, to ask her to enter again into a house with the people of which she was so much offended, would she be pleased to give orders for her clothes to be brought up hither? Or should Dorcas attend her for any of her commands on that head? She desired not ever more to see any body belonging to that house. She might perhaps get Mrs. Moore or Mrs. Bevis to go thither for her, and take her keys with them. I doubted not, I said, that Lady Betty would arrive by that time. I hoped she had no objection to my bringing that lady and my cousin Montague up with me. She was silent. To be sure, Mr. Lovelace, said the Captain, the lady can have no objection to this. She was still silent. So silence in this case was assent. Would she be pleased to write to Miss Howe? Sir, peevishly interrupting, no more questions, no prescribing to me. You will do as you think fit. So will I, as I please. I owe no obligation to you. Captain Tomlinson, your servant. Recommend me to my uncle Harlowe's favour. And was going. I took her reluctant hand, and besought her only to promise to meet me early in the morning. To what purpose meet you? Have you more to say than has been said? I have had enough of vows and protestations, Mr. Lovelace. To what purpose should I meet you to-morrow morning? I repeated my request, and that in the most fervent manner, naming 6 in the morning. You know that I am always stirring before that hour at this season of the year, was the half-expressed consent. She then again recommended herself to her uncle's favour, and withdrew. And thus, Belford, has she mended her markets, as Lord M. would say, and I worsted mine. Miss Howe's next letter is now the hinge on which the fate of both must turn. I shall be absolutely ruined and undone, if I cannot intercept it. End of Letter XXXVI. End of Clarissa Harlowe, or the History of a Young Lady, Vol. V. by Samuel Richardson.